Do you believe in curses? I didn't. Not until my own inheritance dragged me into hell. That land promised a future, a home for our unborn child. Instead, it revealed a forgotten grave and demanded an unthinkable price from us. This is not a fabricated horror story. This is a true story of secrets buried alive, of deadly silence, and of a truth paid for with the life of my son. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. The house was full, you see. Unlike me, Clara had siblings. Her mother, Mrs. Margaret, lived there with Clara's 3 younger brothers, Logan, Mason, and Wyatt, who were 16, 14, and 12. Her father had left when they were little. He left Mrs. Margaret alone to raise 4 children. He never came back, never sent a single dime. The good-for-nothing vanished into thin air. Mrs. Margaret hustled to make ends meet, as they say. She did laundry for other people, ironed, cooked meals to sell to the workers at a nearby construction site, sewed, mended. She did everything. She was a strong woman, firm, with calloused hands and tired eyes, but she never gave up. The boys, even though they were young, already worked and brought some change home. Logan helped out at an auto repair shop. Mason carried crates at the local farmer's market, and Wyatt sold popsicles on the street after school. Every penny counted in that house. And even so, Mrs. Margaret still gave us shelter when we got married and had nowhere to go. I worked odd jobs, taking whatever work I could find. One day I'd be a bricklayer's assistant. The next I'd be loading sacks of flour at the general store, sometimes mowing lawns for people in town. I earned little, barely enough to help with expenses and save a few dollars. But we had love, you see. Real love. The kind that makes your stomach warm when the person gets close. That makes you believe things will get better, even when nothing is guaranteed. Clara was young, only 18. She had a gentle way of speaking, and her eyes sparkled when she smiled at me. And it was right at that time, living in that crowded space with nothing of our own, that she found out she was pregnant. 2 months. We had just found out. I remember she told me one afternoon after lunch, when I came home sweaty from work. She held my hand, all nervous, and spoke softly so no one else could hear. I just stood there, not knowing what to do, feeling my heart pound in my chest. A child. We were going to have a child. She was afraid of my reaction, because we had nothing, lived on charity, were always in a tight spot. But I hugged her, held her tight, smelled the sweet scent of her hair and said everything would be okay, that we would manage. She cried, and so did I, right there in that little room, holding each other, feeling the weight and the joy of that news. The first symptoms started soon after. She had morning sickness, couldn't eat properly, got tired easily, her breasts were sore. She'd complain softly when she bumped into something, but she had that sparkle in her eye, you know, that look of someone expecting something good, even while being afraid. We would talk at night, lying in bed, making plans. She'd say she wanted a house of our own for the baby to be born in, a place with a yard, with space for the child to run. I promised her I'd get it, that I'd work harder, that I'd find a way. She would hold my hand, place it on her belly that hadn't even started to show, and we would lie there imagining a better future. But I'll be honest with you, my dear, even with all that joy, I felt a tightness in my chest. How were we going to raise a child there, depending on my mother-in-law, with nothing of our own? Mrs. Margaret already had her own problems, her boys to support. Life was hard. We couldn't stay there forever. I needed to find a way, a solution, a place of our own. Maybe you're wondering why we didn't go live with my parents, right? After all, I was an only child. There was plenty of space there. Well, my dear, there's an explanation for that. My father, Mr. Walter, was a closed-off man, far too serious, the kind who barely looks you in the eye when he speaks. He was about 50 years old back then. He worked a steady job in town. He lived with my mother, Mrs. Helen, in a simple but tidy house. The house had 3 bedrooms. Space wasn't the problem, but the atmosphere there was heavy, my dear, heavy as lead. My father was a man of very few words, with a grim expression. He carried a sadness in his eyes that I never knew the source of. The house was always silent, a silence that suffocated you. There was no conversation at the dinner table, no laughter, None of that cozy feeling of home you expect to have. My mother, Mrs. Helen, was more open. She tried to start conversations. She talked more. But when the topic turned to my father's family, she would go quiet, respecting his silence. And over time, even she started to close up too, as if that heaviness was contagious. When I married Clara, we started out paying rent. Then we ran into some difficulties. Clara was a cheerful girl, full of life, full of conversation. She came from a loud, warm family, the kind that argues one minute and hugs the next. She wouldn't have been able to stand the funeral home atmosphere of my parents' house, and I didn't want her to go through that either. I didn't want her to feel the weight I felt every time I walked into that house. Later on in my story, I'll tell you more about that. All I know is that we ended up at Mrs. Margaret's, even knowing it would be cramped, that we'd have little privacy, that it would be hard. But at least there was life, there was love, there were people who hugged each other, who talked, who shared their bread even when there was little of it. And for me and Clara, that was worth more than having space and comfort in a cold, silent house. Every now and then we'd go there for Sunday lunch, at my parents' house, to spend a few hours, to say hello, but it was just a visit, you know, not living there. I never knew my paternal grandparents, ever. My father never talked about them, never took us to visit, never showed a picture, nothing. I knew that his father, my grandfather, was named Leonard, and that he had a farm out in the countryside of Missouri. But that's all I knew. When I was a child, I'd ask my father about my grandparents, and he'd change the subject, or simply leave the room. I learned early on not to insist. There was something heavy in the way my father got whenever someone mentioned the farm, his family, the past. It was like he carried a weight on his shoulders that I couldn't understand. His shoulders would slump, his gaze would become distant, his voice softer. My mother told me not to poke at it, that everyone had their pains, that my father had his reasons for not wanting to talk, and I respected that. But it always bothered me. The feeling that there was a hole in my story, a missing piece that no one wanted to talk about. I grew up in the city, far from the farm, far from all of that. My father had left there young, around 18 or 19, met my mother, married, and built a life far away. He never went back. I'd hear vague comments from distant relatives, bits and pieces, like old Leonard was a difficult man. That farm always had strange stories, but nothing concrete. And my father, when he heard these things, would scowl and walk away. Clara, when we started dating, asked about my grandparents. I told her I didn't know my paternal grandparents, that my father didn't talk about them, but I did know my maternal grandparents. My mother's family also lived out in the countryside of Missouri, some uncles and cousins who would come visit us in the city from time to time. I remember the smell of the country road dust they brought on their clothes, of the bags full of homemade preserves, apple butter, and cheddar cheese they brought as gifts. My mother exchanged letters with them regularly, receiving news of weddings, baptisms, births, all that family stuff. But she never went back to the countryside to see her relatives in person. My father didn't want to go, and she felt it was wrong to go without her husband. She'd say it wasn't right for a woman to travel so far alone. So it was just letters, and the visits her relatives made when they could. Clara found it strange, this business of my father not talking about his parents, having no contact, nothing. She came from a family where, despite all the difficulties, everyone knew each other, helped each other, had stories to tell. Her family was different from mine, and I liked that life full of people, of conversation, of movement. I felt more at home with Clara's family than with my own. It was on a Tuesday afternoon that the news arrived. I was at the general store helping unload sacks of beans, sweaty, my back aching, when an acquaintance of my father's showed up saying he needed to talk to me urgently. My heart sank immediately. Urgent is never a good thing, is it? I thought something had happened to my mother, to my father, an accident, an illness. I dropped my work right then and there and went. I arrived at my parents' house with my heart racing. When I walked in, I saw my father sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in his hand, his face even paler than usual. My mother was standing beside him, her hand on his shoulder, with that look of someone who doesn't know what to do. My father lifted his eyes to me, and I saw something different there. It wasn't just sadness. It was relief, fear. I can't quite explain it. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper. Your grandfather's dead. Leonard died last week at the farm. I stood there, not knowing what to feel. How do you feel about the death of someone you've never met, never seen, whose voice you've never heard, who was just a name floating in the air? I said I was sorry, more out of politeness than any real feeling. My father nodded but said nothing, just kept looking at the letter in his hand, his fingers trembling slightly. It was my mother who explained. She said they had received a letter from a lawyer from out in the country, informing them of the death and the inheritance. Old Leonard had left everything to my father. The entire farm, the main house, the land, everything. My father was the sole heir. She said this with a hesitant voice, as if she didn't know whether it was good news or bad. I looked at my father, waiting for some reaction, some comment. He remained silent, his gaze lost, his hands shaking. After a heavy silence that seemed to last for hours, he finally spoke. "I'm not going to get anything. I don't want any of it." Then his eyes suddenly filled with tears, and I saw my father cry. Cry for real, with tears streaming down his face. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen that. My mother whispered to me that his mother had also died. The inheritance had come because his mother was gone, and he was just finding out now. He was crying not for his grandfather, but for the mother he had left behind, whom he would never see again. My father had never gone back there to check if she was okay, never sent a message, nothing. And now it was too late. The letter didn't say anything about his grandmother having died, but if it said he was the sole heir, that's what it meant. In the countryside back then, the body of the deceased didn't wait, my dear. With no electricity in many places, no refrigeration, nothing to preserve it, the burial had to be quick, the same day or the next at the latest. My father had received the news of the death, but his grandfather was already 6 feet under. He let the neighbors there handle the body, the burial, everything, and from what I saw, he really wasn't going. I tried to understand. I asked why. I said he had the right to it, but he looked at me with eyes I had never seen before, eyes full of an old pain, of a stored-up hatred, and said, "You don't understand, Arthur, and it's better that you don't. That man, that place, it's not for me. It never was." The silence fell heavily again. Most people would see a free farm as a blessing, but Walter saw it as a death sentence. Arthur brushed this warning aside, having no idea that his father's tears were trying to save him from a nightmare that was just getting started. It was then that my father stood up from the chair, took the letter and the papers that had come with it, copies of the will, documents for the farm, and held them out to me. "Here, it's yours now. I'll sign whatever is necessary, transfer it to your name, but I will never set foot in that place again, not even in death." I looked at the papers, confused. A farm, land, a large house, all of that was now mine. It felt unreal, like something from a dream. My mother tried to calm the situation, said we didn't need to decide anything right then, that it was too much information at once. But my father insisted. He wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible, as if the papers were burning his hands. I took the documents and read them slowly. It was a large property, with a main house, a barn, arable land, all legally registered in my grandfather's name, and now passing to my father as the sole heir. There were even some old yellowish photos of the main house with it. It was beautiful, large, well-maintained. It was about 15 miles from the nearest town, in the middle of the Missouri countryside, surrounded by woods. I went back to my mother-in-law's house with my head spinning. I told Clara everything. She was sitting on the bed, crocheting a baby outfit, her 2-month belly still flat. When I finished my story, she stopped crocheting and looked at me with those bright, hopeful eyes. "Arthur, this means we can have our own place, a home for us, a place for our child to be born." I saw the joy on her face and felt my heart ache. Was it right to accept this? My father had made it clear that there was something wrong with that farm, with that past. Or was the problem just with my grandfather? But at the same time, what did I have to lose? It was an opportunity that would never come again, a chance to give Clara and our child a home of our own. I spent the night awake thinking. I looked at Clara and thought about the future. I thought about us leaving that cramped little room, having space, having land to plant, having dignity. I thought about our child having his own room. I imagined him running in a big yard, breathing fresh air, far from the dust and congestion of the city. The next day I went back to my parents' house. I told my father that I accepted, that I wanted the farm, that I was going to try to make it work. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. My mother was worried. She said maybe it would be better for us to sell it all, take the money, and buy something else. Something different, far from that place. I thought that was a good idea myself, and suggested my father do just that. Put the farm up for sale, sell it to someone, get rid of it, and we could take the money to start from scratch without that weight. My father shook his head forcefully, as if we had suggested heresy. No, that could take too long, and you need a place to live. Your son will be born there. Since you want to try, then you should try. Maybe for you it will be different. My mother didn't insist, but her eyes pleaded with mine to reconsider. I didn't listen. It wasn't just stubbornness, it was desperation masked as pride. You have to understand, I was a man with a pregnant wife and empty pockets, living on the charity of my mother-in-law. The shame of poverty burns a man's soul slowly. I looked at that deed not as a cursed piece of paper, but as my only lifeline. I convinced myself that my father's fears were just the ghosts of a weak man, ghosts that I, strong, young, and hungry for dignity, could easily defeat. I told myself I was doing it for Clara, but deep down, I was doing it to prove I wasn't a failure, that vanity would cost me everything. You might be blaming me right now, aren't you? Asking why I was foolish enough to ignore every warning. But let me tell you, my friend, poverty has a way of making a man deaf to fear. Back then, I didn't see a haunted house. I only saw a lifeline, the only chance I had to salvage my dignity as a man. That week we went to the county clerk's office. My father, Clara, and I. The notary had already typed up the deed, and it was set aside for signing. When the time came, my father stood there, staring at the paper, his hands trembling. The man waited in silence. He picked up the pen and signed with an effort. His signature came out crooked, almost illegible. Then the notary explained that for it to be truly valid, I still needed to take that deed to the land registry office in the county where the farm was. He said the process was slow, all done by hand, stamp by stamp, and that it could take weeks or even months for the final registration to be issued. 2 months passed before everything was ready. The clerk's office sent word that the deed had been registered in the correct name, and I went with my father to pick up the papers. When it was all over, he handed me the documents and said, looking deep into my eyes, "Arthur, I hope you have better luck in that place than I did. I truly hope so. But if anything happens, if you feel that something is wrong, get out of there. Don't be stubborn. Don't try to understand. Just leave." I nodded, not quite understanding what he meant. My mother hugged me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Be careful, my son. That's all I ask. Be careful." I returned to my mother-in-law's house with the papers in hand, feeling a mix of euphoria and fear. Clara was waiting for me anxiously. When I showed her the signed documents, she jumped for joy, hugged me tight, and cried with emotion. Mrs. Margaret was happy for us too. She said we deserved it, that it was time for us to have something of our own. The boys, Clara's brothers, were excited. They said they would come visit us, that they would help fix the place up. Finally, after 2 months that felt like 2 years, the farm was officially mine. I was 24 years old, had a wife who was 4 months pregnant, no experience with land other than mowing lawns, no idea what was to come. But I had hope, I had love, and I thought that was enough. Mrs. Margaret helped us pack. The boys found some old suitcases, helped pack clothes, pots, the few things we had. My mother came too, bringing some sheets, towels, some kitchen things she said she didn't use anymore, but I knew she was giving us the best she had. My father showed up on moving day, a rare thing. He stood at the gate of my mother-in-law's house, watching us load our things into an old Ford pickup truck that an acquaintance was letting us use. He said almost nothing, just stood there observing. When everything was ready, he approached me, put his heavy hand on my shoulder, and said, "Good luck, son. Send a letter as soon as you get there. Find out what happened to my mother." And he left without looking back. Clara got into the truck, her small belly showing, her face flushed with emotion. I got in on the other side and we left. "Mrs." Margaret and the boys waved until we disappeared around the corner. My mother was there too, with a handkerchief in her hand, wiping her tears. The road to the farm was long, dusty, and full of potholes. Clara held my hand, looked out the window, caressed her belly. We didn't know what we were going to find, but in that moment, driving down that dirt road, with the sun beating down and the red dust kicking up, All we felt was hope. We only saw what we had built in our minds. We didn't know we were heading straight into hell. It took us almost 4 hours to get there. We left the city, passed through a few small towns, and then the woods started to close in. The road became more and more of a dirt track, more and more isolated. When the farm appeared before us, we fell silent. It was big, my dear, really big. The main house was beautiful, well maintained, a deep red brick with green shutters, a wide porch in the front, and lots of space. There was a huge piece of land around it, surrounded by woods, tall trees, and silence. It was about 15 miles from the nearest town, completely isolated. There were no neighbors nearby, just property, woods, sky, and more woods. Clara got out of the truck. She looked at the house from a distance, then looked at me and smiled. But it was a weak smile, you know, as if there was fear behind that joy. "It's beautiful, Arthur," she said. "It's truly beautiful." But her voice came out small, a bit timid. We got out of the truck and started unloading our things. A friend from town had helped us drive the truck up, but he didn't stay long. He helped us put the heavy furniture under the porch, gave me a sympathetic pat on the back, and drove off, leaving us alone in that immense silence. Behind the house was a huge, clear piece of land that seemed perfect for a garden. There was a large barn with tools inside, shovels, hoes, post-hole diggers, all still in good condition. There was a well with a hand pump. It was all there, my dear, everything I needed to start. I ran my hand over the tools and felt a genuine joy in my chest. This was mine. This was ours. I went back inside. Clara was sitting in the kitchen with a glass of water in her hand, looking a bit pale. I asked if she was okay. She said she was just tired from the trip, that she needed to rest. We made up one of the rooms for us to sleep in, put on the new sheets, arranged a few things. Clara went to bed early. It was still late afternoon, but she was exhausted. At night, when I lay down beside her, we were silent. The silence of that place was different, you know, different from the silence of the city, even in the middle of the night. It was a living silence, full of sounds we couldn't quite identify. The wind in the trees, insects, maybe some distant owls. Clara would wake up from time to time, startled, asking if I was there. I would hug her, tell her yes, that everything was fine, that it was just the old house creaking, but I myself felt something strange in the air. It wasn't fear, not that clearly. It was more of a feeling, you know, the kind you can't really explain, only feel. It seemed as if the place breathed on its own, as if the wind that came through the cracks carried memories of those who had passed through there, as if those walls, that floor, knew stories we didn't. Stories that time preferred to hide. Maybe it was just the weight of memory or the silence of that old house standing in the middle of the woods. It must have been because of everything it represented. After all, my father was born and raised there. My grandfather was a difficult man, the kind who leaves marks that don't fade easily. There was so much on my mind, my dear, you can't even imagine. We arrive thinking we're starting a new life, but sometimes the past is already there waiting for us. The first few days were like that, you see, my dear. Work for me, tidying up for Clara, both of us trying to adapt to that silence, that isolation. The distant neighbors started to appear, but always with that somewhat sheepish manner, as if they were ashamed of something that wasn't even their fault. The first to come was Mr. Dale. He must have been in his late 60s, skinny, with a worn-out straw hat that he didn't take off even to talk to us. He showed up one morning riding an old mule, carrying some free-range chicken eggs in a cloth bag. He clapped at the gate, waited for me to come out. When he saw me, he gave a little half-smile, greeted me politely, and asked how we were settling in. I invited him in for some coffee to rest a bit. He accepted, but he didn't get off the mule right away. He just stared at the main house, the yard, the open windows, as if he were looking for something that was no longer there. He asked if I had bought the land, if I knew the previous owner. When I told him I was Arthur, Walter's son, his eyes lit up. "Little Walt," he said with a sad little smile. "I remember him running around barefoot here, a boy full of life. Your grandfather, Mr. Leonard, and your grandmother, Mrs. Josephine, lived here. So, you're their grandson, and your father. He didn't come back with you?" "No, sir. He's alive. He lives in the city. He passed the inheritance on to me." Mr. Dale's eyes widened slightly, as if that was even stranger than him being dead. I quickly explained that my father had passed the inheritance on to me. Mr. Dale was quiet for a moment, then he got off the mule and tied it to a post, but he didn't come into the house. No. He stood there on the porch, looking inside through the half-open door. Clara appeared from the kitchen with her sweet, smiling manner, offering coffee and cornbread muffins that her mother had sent with us. Mr. Dale thanked her, accepted the coffee, but remained standing there without coming inside. He drank the coffee standing up, holding the cup with both hands. We talked about the farm, about how well-preserved everything was, how I had plans to plant a few things, raise some animals. That's when he lowered his voice and confessed that after Mr. Leonard died, no one showed up to take care of the animals. He said that he and some neighbors had gotten together and taken the animals, goats, pigs, chickens, ducks, that sort of thing, so they wouldn't starve. He asked when he could bring them back and said he would let the others know. I didn't know what to say, my dear. I had no idea what to feed those animals, or if I even had the setup to care for them. I told him to hold off for now, that we'd talk once I got organized. He listened, nodded, agreed, but there was a weight in his eyes, you know, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. I asked about my grandmother, Mrs. Josephine, if he knew what had happened to her. My father had asked me to find out, and it was weighing on my heart. Mr. Dale took a deep breath. She was a good woman, Mr. Arthur, a good-hearted woman, but Mr. Leonard was a difficult man. He wouldn't let us visit, wouldn't let her leave. The windows were always closed. One day, she just disappeared. Mr. Leonard said she had left, that she had run away. No one ever heard from her again. He looked at the ground, shook his head. Your father was smart. He left here young and never came back. He did the right thing. I felt a lump in my throat. I thanked him for the eggs. I said we'd be in touch if we needed anything. He left the same way he came, slowly, looking back every now and then. Clara stood on the porch, watching him go, and said softly, "What a strange man, isn't he? It's like he's afraid to even come in here." I shrugged, but deep down, I had found it strange too. A few days later, Mrs. Patricia appeared. She was Mr. Dale's wife, a short lady with her hair in a bun, wearing a plaid apron, with the face of someone who had been working since childhood and never stopped. She brought some homemade cheeses and some loaves of homemade bread that she had baked herself in her wood-fired oven. Clara loved it, thanked her profusely, and invited her in to sit and talk for a bit. Mrs. Patricia accepted, but she also stayed on the porch. She sat in the rocking chair there, folded her hands in her lap, and stared at the yard with a distant look. Clara sat next to her and started a conversation, asking how long she had lived there, if she had children, things like that. Mrs. Patricia answered slowly, cautiously. She said she had lived nearby for over 30 years, that she had raised her children there, that she had known this place since she was a young woman. She spoke of grandmother Josephine with affection. She said she used to pray the rosary every afternoon here on the porch, that she was a woman of few words but with a good heart. But when she spoke of Mr. Leonard, her voice changed. "That man was not a man of God," she said softly. Clara tensed up. I could tell by the way she clutched the hem of her dress. Mrs. Patricia continued, "He was a brutish man, difficult to deal with. He wouldn't let anyone in here. No one visited Mrs. Josephine. We'd see her from a distance when we went to fetch water, when we passed by on the road, but never inside the house." She sighed deeply and added, "When she disappeared, no one believed she had just left, but no one had the courage to ask. No one had the courage to confront Mr. Leonard. It sounds cowardly, doesn't it? But in those days, out in these backwoods, the law was a distant concept, while the fists of brutal men were very real and very close. Sometimes, silence isn't complicity. It is simply the only way the powerless can survive." A heavy silence fell between us. Clara whispered, almost to herself, "These people are afraid of even his name." Mrs. Patricia heard her but didn't reply. She just stood up from the chair, smoothed her apron, and said she had to go, that she had left clothes on the line and was afraid it might rain. Before she left, she held Clara's hand tightly and said, looking deep into her eyes, "Be careful in this house, young lady. There are things here we don't understand, things that have been kept hidden. If you feel anything strange, don't stay, just leave." And she left, walking quickly, without looking back. Clara stood there, her hand still warm from Mrs. Patricia's grip, her face pale. I was shaken too. I needed to write to my father, to tell him what I had found out. But at night, when I lay in bed next to Clara, the silence returned. That heavy silence, full of things we couldn't see but could feel. Clara curled up, clung to me, and whispered in my ear, "Arthur, I'm scared. Scared of this house, scared of what Mrs. Patricia said." I hugged her, held her tight, smelled her hair mixed with the scent of firewood from the kitchen. I told her I was there, that I wouldn't let anything bad happen to her, that we would be fine. She cried softly, her hand on her belly, protecting the child, and I stayed awake, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the wind beat against the shutters, hearing the creaks of the old wood, feeling the weight of that place, thinking about my grandmother Josephine, who had left. Where could she have gone? Thinking about my grandfather Leonard, whom no one liked, thinking if I had done the right thing in accepting that inheritance. It was too late to turn back. We were already there, and what was meant to happen would happen one way or another. The day after the conversation with Mrs. Patricia, I knew I had to write to my parents. My father had asked me to find out what had happened to his mother, and now I had at least part of the answer, though it wasn't a good one. It was just a cold, unsettling mystery. I decided I wouldn't tell him the neighbor's darkest suspicions, not yet. I sat at the kitchen table, took out a pen and paper, and started to write. Clara was beside me, embroidering a cloth diaper for the baby. I wrote slowly, choosing each word with care. "Dear Mom and Dad, we've been here for almost 2 weeks now. The farm is large, beautiful, and well kept. There's a lot of work ahead, but we're settling in little by little. The neighbors are good people. I met Mr. Dale and Mrs. Patricia, who live nearby. They remembered you, Dad. They said, 'Little Walt used to run around barefoot here, full of life. They have good memories of you.' Dad, about Grandma Josephine, I managed to find out a few things. Mr. Dale and Mrs. Patricia said that she disappeared one day without a trace. Grandpa Leonard said she had left, that she had run away, but she didn't say goodbye to anyone. They never heard from her again. The people here are afraid to talk about it. They're even afraid to enter the house. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know she wasn't happy here and that Grandpa wouldn't let anyone visit her. I'm writing all this with a heavy heart. I know you wanted a better answer. I wish I had one to give. We need to find out where Grandma is, where she might have gone. Dad, Clara sends her love to you both. She's also writing to my mother-in-law and her brothers. The baby is growing well, thank God. With love, Arthur." I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and wrote my parents' address. But you couldn't mail a letter from the farm. No mail came, no news, nothing. We were truly isolated, my dear. So, once a week, I would go down to the town to drop off and pick up mail at the post office. Mr. Dale had lent me an old horse, a gentle bay who knew the way with his eyes closed. It was about 15 miles of dirt road, dusty when it was sunny, muddy when it rained. It took about 2 hours, more or less, depending on the weather. I got to town and dropped the letter at the post office. The mailman, a fat man with a white mustache, took the letter, stamped it, and said it would go out the following week. I took the opportunity to buy a few things: salt, sugar, kerosene for the lamp, some candles. I returned to the farm in the late afternoon, with the sun already setting on the horizon. Clara was waiting for me on the porch. She asked if everything had gone well. I told her yes, that the letters had been sent. She sighed and said that now all we could do was wait. We went inside, had a silent dinner, and went to bed early. The exhaustion from the trip weighed on my body. My hips ached from riding the horse for so long. I wasn't used to it. The following week, I went back to town. When I got to the post office, the mailman called me by name. "Mr. Arthur, there's a letter here for you." I felt my heart beat faster. It was from my mother. I recognized her beautiful, neat handwriting, her calligraphy. I thanked him. I put the letter in my shirt pocket close to my chest. I didn't want to open it there in the middle of the street. I wanted to be at home with Clara by my side. I bought the things I needed and went back to the farm. Clara saw me arrive and could tell by my demeanor that there was news. "Did a letter come?" she asked anxiously. I showed her the envelope. She was sad that there was no letter from her mother. We sat on the porch and I opened it slowly. Clara read over my shoulder. My mother's handwriting was firm, full of affection. She said my letter had been like a welcome visit, that Dad had read it in silence, without a word, but she had seen the relief in his eyes. She wrote that she thought it was good for him to hear the neighbors thought his mother might have left. It gave him hope. He had cried so much when the inheritance letter came, she said, not just for his father, but for the mother he felt he'd abandoned. She said my father mentioned she might have gone to her sister's house in northern Tennessee. She ended the letter by thanking God that I was there with a good-hearted woman, asking me to take care of her and our grandchild. With love and missing you, signed, your mother, Helen. Clara had tears in her eyes when she finished reading. Your mother is a wise woman, Arthur. I nodded, folded the letter carefully, and put it back in my pocket. That night, we went to bed earlier than usual. Clara was tired. Her belly was starting to grow, the baby demanding rest. I turned off the lamp, lay down beside her, and held her hand. The silence of the farm returned. That heavy silence that we were starting to know, but that still bothered us. But in the middle of the night, Clara woke up with a start. She sat up in bed suddenly, panting, her face pale even in the dark. I quickly lit the lamp and asked what had happened. She was trembling, her hand on her chest. I had a dream, Arthur. I dreamed of a woman. Her voice came out in a small, frightened whisper. She was standing in the yard, looking at the house. She had a rosary in her hands, one of those with white beads, and her eyes were full of sadness. Deep sadness. I felt a shiver run up my spine. What did she look like? I asked, even though I didn't want to know. Thin, her hair tied back, wearing a dark dress, and she didn't say anything, she just stared. But I knew she wanted to tell me something. I knew it. Clara huddled closer. It was her, Arthur. It was Mrs. Josephine. I feel it was her, your grandmother. I hugged my wife, tried to calm her down, said it was just a dream, that our minds play tricks on us when we think too much about things. But deep down, my dear, I felt it too. I felt that there was something wrong with that place, something that hadn't been said, something that was still hidden. Clara took a long time to fall back asleep. She clung to me, her breathing still rapid, her hand on her belly. She made me feel her heart, which took a long time to slow down, and I lay there awake, looking at the window, at the dark yard outside, wondering if there really was someone standing there in the dark, watching us. A few days after Clara's dream about the woman with the rosary, life on the farm continued in that strange, heavy routine. I worked outside, clearing the brush, cleaning the paths, trying to fix up the barn. Clara stayed inside, tidying, cleaning, trying to make that place a real home. But there was something in the air that wouldn't let us be at peace, you know, a weight that wouldn't go away. It was one afternoon that Clara decided to clean up the back hallway of the house. It was a narrow, somewhat dark hallway that led to the yard. There were some old crates piled up, some broken furniture, the kind of stuff you leave forgotten because you don't know what to do with it. She was there sweeping, clearing away cobwebs, when she noticed a small, low door, almost hidden behind an old cabinet. When I got back from work, she called me. "Arthur, come see something." I went over, still sweaty, with the hoe in my hand. She pointed to the little door. "There's a door here. I hadn't seen it before." I pushed, but couldn't open it. I got closer, bent down, examined it. It was a small door indeed, made of thick wood, with a rusty iron latch. I tried to open it, but the latch was stiff, seized by rust and time. I pulled hard, and it gave way with a dry creak that echoed down the hallway. The door opened slowly, groaning on its old hinges, and the smell that came from inside was the first thing we noticed. A strong smell of something old, of mold, of damp earth. But there was something else too, a sweetish, slightly nauseating smell, the smell of candles, of burnt wax. I grabbed the lamp and held it up to light the inside. It was a small, low-ceilinged cellar, with a wooden roof and a dirt floor. There was almost nothing inside. Some old boxes, some moldy cloths, cobwebs covering everything. But in the corner, at the very back, there were some candles, white candles, used, melted down, with the wax dripping and forming mounds on the floor. Clara stood behind me, holding onto my shirt. I felt her tremble. "Arthur, close it. Please, close it." Her voice came out in a small, frightened whisper. I closed the door, latched it again, and pushed the cabinet back into place, but the smell lingered, clinging to us, in the hallway, throughout the entire house. That specific smell of burnt wax wasn't just a sign of old prayers. It was the lingering scent of a terror that had been locked away for decades. Keep listening, because what they find next proves that some secrets refuse to stay buried. That night, the smell returned, stronger. We were in bed, trying to sleep, when Clara suddenly sat up. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I smelled it. The smell of burnt wax, strong, as if someone were lighting candles nearby. I got up, grabbed the lamp, and went to the hallway. The cellar door was closed, the cabinet in place, but the smell was coming from there, from inside that dark hole. I went back to the room, told Clara there was nothing there, that it was just the lingering smell. But we knew it wasn't just that. We knew something was wrong. Clara started having nightmares every night. She would wake up in the middle of the night, sweaty, her eyes wide, saying she had dreamed of the same woman, the woman with the rosary. Only now she wasn't in the yard anymore. She was kneeling in a dark place, holding the rosary with both hands, praying in silence. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out, and she looked at Clara with those sad eyes, full of a pain that had no end. The next day, I noticed something strange. There were drops of wax on the floor, near the cellar door. White wax, dry, as if someone had walked by with a lit candle, but no one had been there but me and Clara, and we hadn't lit any candles. I didn't show Clara. She was already shaken enough. Without knowing that, she had already told me, "We need to leave, Arthur. This house isn't good. There's something here that doesn't wish us well." I tried to calm her. I said it was because of the silence, because we were used to the noise of her family, but not even I believed that anymore, and that's when Clara started to get sick. It wasn't a physical illness, no, it was something else. She began to sleep too much. She slept in the morning, she slept in the afternoon, she slept at night. She would wake up tired, with dark circles under her eyes, her face pale. She said she had terrible nightmares, but she couldn't remember what they were about. She only remembered the kneeling woman, the praying woman, the woman looking at her with those eyes that were asking for something. And worse, she started saying things she didn't remember later. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see her sitting up in bed, staring into space, murmuring softly. When I asked what she was saying, she wouldn't even answer. She would just be lost, as if she were somewhere else. And in the morning, when I asked if she remembered anything, she would shake her head, confused. Did I say something? I don't remember anything, Arthur. I was getting desperate, my dear. My wife was wasting away in front of me, and I didn't know what to do. I called Mrs. Patricia, asked for help. She came, looked at Clara, made herbal tea, blessed her with a sprig of rue. But when she saw my wife's condition, she shook her head sadly. This house is asking for something, Mr. Arthur. It's asking to be heard. And until you listen, the young lady won't get better. If I tell you something, my dear, just remembering this whole story gives me goosebumps all over, especially on the back of my neck, you know. I feel that chill running up my spine, a shiver that won't go away. Some people don't believe in these things, think it's just old folks' tales, imagination, but I swear to God it's true. Every word I'm telling you really happened. It's my own life. And there are things you don't forget, no matter how hard you try. And I understood that Mrs. Patricia was right. There was something in that house that needed to be revealed, something that was hidden, and the cellar was the door to that secret. But I was afraid to open that door again, afraid of what I would find, afraid of what it would do to us. So I left the door closed, the cabinet in place, the secret kept, and I hoped that it would pass, that Clara would get better, that we could manage to live in peace in that place. But stay with me, for God's sake, because this story is just beginning. There was a well with a hand pump. It was behind the house. Remember I told you? But I discovered another well. This well was on the side of the house, covered with some old planks and surrounded by tall weeds. It was near the window of the room where we slept. In the first few days, I hardly noticed it, you know. I only passed by it when I went to get firewood for the stove. It was just another part of that big yard, another forgotten corner in the middle of the woods, and the time came when I was going to clear the weeds there. That day I cleaned everything up, but I didn't touch the well because I was too tired. It was that night that I heard the noise for the first time. I was lying down, trying to sleep, when I heard it. a faint sound coming from a distance. It sounded like water moving, as if someone had thrown a stone into the well, and the water had splashed against the walls. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. The sound continued for a few seconds and then stopped. Clara heard it too. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Did you hear that?" I said yes, that it must be some animal, a possum, a raccoon, things like that, but we knew it wasn't. We knew there was something different about that sound. The next day, as soon as it was light, I decided to go check it out. I couldn't have that on my mind. I needed to understand. I removed the old planks covering its opening, one by one. The wood was rotten, full of bugs, heavy with moisture. When I removed the last one, I looked inside. It was deep, my dear, very deep. The sunlight barely reached the bottom. You could see the water, but it was way down, dark, still. The walls were made of large stones, stacked one on top of the other, covered in green, slippery moss. And there was that smell of wet earth, of old things, of stagnant water. And the cold, that normal well cold that chills your face. I stood there, looking, trying to see if there was anything different, but there wasn't. It was just an old, abandoned well, with water at the bottom. Nothing strange, nothing that explained the noises we heard in the night. I put the planks back, tied them with wire so no one would fall in, and went back to the house. The following nights the noise returned. Can you believe it? Always in the middle of the night, always the same. Water moving, lightly splashing against the stones of the well, and with the sound came that chill, a cold that seeped in through the gaps in the window, that clung to your skin, that made you pull up more blankets. Clara started having nightmares about that place. She would wake up crying, saying she had dreamed of a child, a small child, calling softly, asking for help. "She's down there, Arthur," Clara would say, her eyes wide, still lost in the dream. "She's calling. She wants to get out." I tried to calm her. I said it was just a nightmare, a side effect of the pregnancy, that our minds played tricks on us. But deep down, my dear, I felt it too. I felt there was something in that well, something that didn't want to stay quiet. During the day when I passed by, the wind made a strange noise there, but I didn't think much of it. I had to hold myself together, you know. If you try to understand everything you hear in the middle of a farm, in the middle of the woods, you'd go crazy, my dear. There were noises from animals, breaking branches, wind whistling through the trees, birds. Sometimes it even sounded like people talking far away, when it was just the wind in the dry leaves. And it was enough with my wife being the way she was, getting weaker, more frightened, sleeping poorly, having nightmares every night. I couldn't lose my mind too. Someone had to keep a level head, take care of things, hold it all together. So I pretended everything was normal, that it was just the farm and its noises. I started avoiding that corner of the yard. When I needed to get firewood, I took a longer route, stayed far away. Clara got worse. She was already weak because of that whole cellar business, sleeping too much, saying things that didn't make sense. And now there was this business with the well too. She would wake up in the middle of the night, sit up in bed, look at the window that faced the yard, and just stay there, staring into the darkness at the well. When I asked what she was looking at, she would say, "There's someone there. There's a child out there." I would jump up, my heart pounding, look out the window, and see nothing but the dark woods, the empty yard, the covered well, but Clara insisted. She said she saw a small shadow standing near the well, a shadow that just stood there, looking at the house as if it wanted to come in. Things started to get even stranger. The air inside the house changed. It became heavy, hard to breathe. There were times we'd suddenly feel a chill, even in the middle of the day with the sun beating down outside, a chill that came from nowhere, that froze your body, that made the hairs on your arms stand on end. And the smells, my God, the smells. Sometimes we'd smell wet earth, something rotten, stagnant water. The smell came from inside the house. It seemed to seep out of the walls, the floor. We cleaned everything, scrubbed, mopped with salt water, but the smell always came back. It always returned. Clara cried a lot. She said she couldn't take it anymore, that she wanted to leave, that this place wasn't good for us. She would hold her belly, protecting the baby, as if she were afraid that all this would harm the child. And I, my dear, I didn't know what to do anymore. I was afraid to admit she was right, afraid to admit we had to leave and go back to my mother-in-law's house, to that cramped, suffocating situation we were in before. But I was stubborn, young, proud. I had bet everything on that farm, had left the city, had brought my pregnant wife there. I couldn't give up now. I couldn't go back and tell my father he was right, that the place was cursed. Really, I remembered going to sign those papers at the clerk's office with my father. That farm was mine now, it was ours, we had to accept it. So I stayed, we stayed, trying to endure. The weeks went by, her belly was growing, nice and round, about 5 or 6 months pregnant. You could feel the baby moving inside. Clara would put my hand there so I could feel the little kicks. It was beautiful, you know, moving. It was one morning that Clara came into the kitchen with an idea. Her eyes were shining, with an excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. "Arthur," she said, holding my hand, "we need to make a garden, a beautiful garden with vegetables, herbs and flowers to bring some life to this house." The day before, I had come back from town with a letter from my mother-in-law, Mrs. Margaret. Clara had read and reread that letter about 10 times, smiling with her eyes misty with longing. Her mother asked if we had a garden, if we were eating fresh vegetables, if I was taking good care of her and the baby. She said she missed her daughter, that her brothers sent their love, that she prayed every day for us to be well. And Clara was more cheerful after that letter. It seemed like her mother's words had given her strength, you know, a new spirit. "Mom is right, Arthur. We need to plant. We need to have vegetables, green things, living things." Behind the house was that huge, clear piece of land I'd seen, but in one corner of it, I'd noticed an old, abandoned garden plot. It was all ruined, dead tomato plants, weeds taking over, the soil cracked and dry. It must have been beautiful once, but now it was just sad. It must have been beautiful once, but now it was just sad. I thought maybe she was right, that we needed to do something different, something that would bring life, color, hope. So I agreed. I said I would make a new garden out back, in that clear patch of land there. I asked Mr. Dale for help. He always helped me. He was a good man, despite all the fear he had of the farm. When I told him I was going to make a garden, his eyes lit up. "That's good, Mr. Arthur, very good. Good earth needs life. It needs things growing." He showed up the next day with a sack full of seedlings. He brought lettuce, tomato, kale, chives, cilantro, even some little flower seedlings that Mrs. Patricia had sent. Mrs. Patricia said a pregnant woman needs to see beautiful things growing. "Flowers cheer the heart," he said, handing everything to Clara. She thanked him with misty eyes, hugging the seedlings as if they were babies. I had refused to take the animals back in that first conversation, remember? I had told him to hold off for now, that I didn't know how to care for them. But Mr. Dale didn't give up. A few days later, he showed up and made me go to his house to get a rooster and some hens. He helped me bring a pair of them over. We made a few trips back and forth. I improved the chicken coop with some planks and wire mesh. I fixed the roost. Mr. Dale explained that I had to give them corn and clean water every day. Let them scratch around during the day to eat insects, greens, the things chickens like. At night, you lock them in the coop. Otherwise, a predator will get them, he advised. In the morning, you let them out, change the water, give them corn, and let them roam. They know how to take care of themselves. They're smart animals. Clara was overjoyed whenever she found eggs in the morning, running to show me as if they were treasure. The next day, bright and early, I grabbed the hoe, the spade, the rake. Clara came with me, all excited, her round belly showing under her flowered dress. She sat in the shade of a large tree nearby, her hand on her belly, watching me work. I was going to start digging where the old garden was, where the soil had already been tilled. It would be easier. But Clara raised her hand and pointed to the other side. "No, Arthur. I want it over there, in that little corner." I looked at the spot she was pointing to. It was a patch of virgin soil, covered in weeds, about 6 feet away from the old plot. "Clara, the soil is softer over here," I argued, pointing to the existing garden. "It'll take me twice as long to break new ground." But she wouldn't budge. She stood there, a strange certainty in her eyes, pointing a trembling finger at that specific patch of weeds. "No, Arthur, it has to be there." There was a strange glint in her eye, a certainty I couldn't understand. "No, my dear, I want it there. I feel like that's where it has to be. Please do it there for me." I wasn't going to argue with my pregnant wife, was I? Especially seeing her so excited, so full of hope. So I agreed. All right, if you want it there, that's where I'll do it. You're the boss. She smiled her sweet smile and sat there watching. I went to the spot she had pointed to, stuck the hoe in the ground, and started digging. I started digging. The soil there was good, dark, moist. You could tell it was fertile land, that beautiful things would grow there. I started making the rows slowly, the way Mr. Dale had taught me, sweating in the hot morning Sunday. But when I was digging the third row, I felt that the soil was different. It was too soft. It didn't have the normal resistance, the hardness of soil that has never been tilled. I stopped, looked at the ground, a bit confused, and dug a little more carefully. And that's when the hoe hit something hard, a dry thud of metal on stone. I dropped the hoe, knelt down, and started clearing the dirt with my hands. First, some pieces of cloth appeared, old rotten cloth that disintegrated in my hand. Then some small bones, thin, white bones, dirty with soil. I started to get terrified, especially when I pulled a rosary covered in dirt from the ground. I crumbled the dirt away with my fingers and saw a rosary with white beads, rusted at the clasp. The smell hit me suddenly. The smell of old earth, of something buried for a long time, of death. I felt my stomach turn, my head spin. I just stayed there, kneeling, looking at it, unable to believe it. There was a body buried there, a human body in my own yard. I heard Clara scream, a sharp, desperate scream that tore through the morning silence. I looked at her. She was on her feet, white as a sheet, both hands on her belly, her eyes wide, fixed on those bones. Arthur, Arthur, what is that? What did you find? I got up quickly, tried to go to her, but my legs were shaky, they wouldn't obey. Clara, calm down, stay calm, I said, but my voice came out trembling, with no firmness. Don't look at it, come on, let's go inside. But she couldn't look away. She just stood there, staring, trembling all over, and suddenly her legs gave out. She fell to her knees with a low moan, her hand on her chest. It's her, Clara whispered in a broken voice. It's her, Arthur. It's Mrs. Josephine. She was here the whole time. She never left. In that moment, the dream of a peaceful home shattered completely. Finding those bones wasn't just a gruesome discovery. It was the first piece of a puzzle that would explain why the farm had been so silent. But the price for this truth was about to become heartbreakingly high. I rushed to her. I caught her in my arms before she could fall completely. Clara, Clara, look at me. But she didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back. Her body went limp, heavy. She had fainted. I carried her into the house, laid her on the bed, wet a cloth with cold water, and put it on her forehead. I stayed there beside her, holding her hand, feeling her heart beat too fast, her breath short and shallow. Wake up, Clara, please, wake up. For God's sake, wake up. It took her a few minutes to come to. When she opened her eyes, she looked at me with so much fear, so much pain, that I felt like crying. We have to leave, Arthur, she said in a weak voice. We have to get out of here now. This place is cursed. Your grandfather killed her. I wanted to say yes, that we would leave. But I couldn't. Not yet, because now there was a body buried in the yard. There was evidence of a crime. She was right. It could be my grandmother, my father's mother, whom no one had ever seen again, buried there like an animal, and I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to call someone. I needed to do something. Stay here, rest, I told Clara, covering her with the sheet. I'm going to call Mr. Dale. I'm going to ask for help. We'll sort this out. But Clara grabbed my arm with force. Her eyes were wide, full of fear. Don't leave me alone, Arthur. Don't leave me. I won't stay here alone with that thing out there. Her voice came out in a muffled, desperate cry. Her whole body was shaking, her hand on her belly protecting the baby. I looked at her and understood that there was no other way. She wouldn't stay. She couldn't stay. All right, Clara? All right. You'll come with me. We'll go together. I helped her up. I put her shoes on. We walked slowly down the dirt road, her holding onto my arm, stumbling on the rocks. It took about half an hour to get to Mr. Dale's house. When we arrived, we knocked on the door. He opened it, saw us in that state, me sweaty, covered in dirt, Clara pale as death, and immediately knew something was very wrong. Mr. Arthur, Mrs. Clara, what happened? Come in. For God's sake, come in. Mrs. Patricia came running, held Clara, and led her inside. We went in, sat in the living room, and I told them I was digging the garden and found bones, human bones, a rosary, pieces of old clothing buried in the yard. Mr. Dale turned white. Mrs. Patricia put a hand to her mouth, stifling a scream. "Jesus Christ, protect us," she whispered, making the sign of the cross. "It's her," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "It's my grandmother. She never left. She was here the whole time, buried in the yard." I took a deep breath and continued, and it was Clara who pointed to the spot. I was going to dig where the old garden was, but she insisted it had to be there. She said she felt it had to be there, as if something had guided her. Clara started crying harder, sobbing, shaking her head. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what was there. I just felt it had to be in that spot. Mrs. Patricia sat beside Clara, hugged her tightly, let her cry on her shoulder. She held Clara's face in her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "Listen to me, my child. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. You are not to blame for anything. Nothing, do you understand?" Clara nodded, still crying. Mrs. Patricia continued in a firm voice, full of conviction. "It was God who used you. It was He who showed you the way. Mrs. Josephine was there alone, forgotten, with no one to pray for her, with no one knowing. And God used you to reveal this truth, to get her out of that dark hole, to give her soul rest. But I'm so scared," Clara whispered, trembling. I know, but you did nothing wrong. You did the right thing. You brought the truth to light. And that's not a bad thing, no. That is God's work. Her soul will now be able to rest. And you were the instrument of that. Do you understand?" Clara nodded slowly, still shaking, but with a little less despair in her eyes. "Mrs." Patricia wiped her tears with her apron and kissed her forehead. "You stay here with me, all right? You stay here and I'll take care of you. The men will go and sort this out, and when it's all over, we'll pray together for Mrs. Josephine's soul. We will give her what she deserved to have in life: respect, dignity, and rest." I left with Mr. Dale. We had to go to town, call the police, notify the authorities. We couldn't just leave it. Mr. Dale lent me his horse. He got on his mule, and we rode down the dirt road. The two of us in silence, just the sound of hooves on the dry earth, the hot sun beating down on our backs. It took about 2 hours to get to town. When we arrived, we tied the animals to a tree in front of the sheriff's office. It was a small brick building with an old sign hanging over the door. We went inside. There were 2 deputies inside, sitting at a table, playing dominoes with a noisy fan spinning overhead. Small town, my dear. Not much happened. They just sat there, passing the time, waiting for something to happen. When we walked in, they both stood up, dropping their dominoes. The sheriff was a serious man with a graying mustache, a beer belly, and a uniform that was a bit too tight. He recognized Mr. Dale immediately. "Dale, what brings you here?" Mr. Dale took off his hat, held it with both hands. "Sheriff, we need your help. There's a serious problem at old Mr. Leonard's farm. His grandson here, Arthur, found something bad. Very bad." The sheriff looked at me, then at Mr. Dale. "What kind of thing?" I took a deep breath. "Bones, Sheriff. Human bones buried in the yard. I was digging to make a garden and I found them. There's a rosary with them, some old clothes. They've been there a long time." The sheriff got serious, looked at the other deputy, a skinny investigator with Coke bottle glasses. "Get the coroner. Tell him we're heading out now, and get the car ready." It took about 15 minutes. The coroner showed up, a middle-aged man with a leather briefcase in his hand. They prepared the car, an old, noisy Ford Bronco. The sheriff looked at us. "Are you coming with us? I'll have the horses brought to you by tomorrow." When we got to the farm, it was almost 2 in the afternoon. The sun was high, burning. "Where is it?" the sheriff asked. I led them to the yard. I showed them the hole. The bones were visible among the dark earth. The coroner knelt down and began to examine them carefully, with gloves on his hands. He dug a little more around the area, slowly, with a small trowel and a brush, and he found more things, more bones. Small, thin bones. And right beside them, very close, another smaller skeleton of a dog, a medium-sized dog, its bones mixed with the earth, its skull turned to the side. "There's a dog here too," the coroner said without taking his eyes off the hole. Buried with her. Must have died around the same time. I felt my chest tighten. Buried together in the same hole, as if they had died together. The coroner continued excavating with patience and technique. He found more things. A wedding ring. A thin, simple yellow gold wedding ring, with some letters engraved inside that were barely legible from where. He picked up the ring carefully, cleaned it a bit with a cloth, and looked at it closely. There are initials here, J and L, engraved inside. He looked at me. Your grandfather's name was Leonard, wasn't it? And your grandmother Josephine? Yes, I said with a hoarse voice. Mrs. Josephine. He nodded slowly. J and L, Josephine and Leonard. Probably her wedding ring. He put the ring in a small plastic bag along with the rosary. The coroner continued to work, carefully digging around, removing each bone slowly and methodically. He placed everything in a cloth-lined wooden box he had brought. All the bones, one by one. The skull, the ribs, the arm bones, the leg bones, everything. And the dog's bones too, which he separated into a different bag. I'm taking all this to the hospital in the city, he explained as he worked. They have a lab there, a medical examiner. They'll do a full examination on the bones, see how long they've been buried, what age the person was when they died, if there are any signs of violence, things like that. And they'll officially confirm that they are human bones, that it's a woman, all proper to be included in the report. The sheriff stood beside me, his arms crossed, his face grim. Mr. Arthur, you'll have to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Tell us exactly how you found this. What you know about the family, about your grandfather, about your grandmother's disappearance. Everything, I agreed. What else could I do? The coroner continued working, taking pictures, making measurements, noting everything in a small notebook. It took hours. When he finished, they covered the hole with a cloth and cordoned off the area with a rope. Nobody touches this until we get back, the sheriff warned. This is a crime scene now. Crime scene. The words echoed in my head. My yard was a crime scene. My grandmother had been murdered and buried there. And I, without knowing, had lived there, slept there, tried to make a life there. Before they left, the sheriff called me aside. Mr. Arthur, we need to notify the family. Your father, where does he live? I gave him the address, the city, the street, the number. The sheriff wrote it all down. I'll send an officer there tomorrow morning to inform him of the discovery and to ask him to come here, if possible, to identify the objects, the ring, the rosary, to see if he recognizes them. I felt a tightness in my chest. My father would have to see that, would have to confirm it was his mother, that she had been murdered, that she had never left. That took the whole afternoon. It was getting dark when they finished. The sheriff heard me say that I had to pick up Clara at Mr. Dale's house. I had even arranged to stay there for the night, since it was late, and Clara needed rest. The sheriff looked at me and Mr. Dale. You're without your horses, right? We'll give you a ride to Mr. Dale's house. No problem. We accepted. We got into the back seat of the Bronco. The coroner carefully placed the box with the bones in the trunk, and we set off down the dirt road, kicking up dust. No one said anything, just the sound of the engine, the creaking of the car on the bumpy road, the wind coming in through the open window. When we got near Mr. Dale's house, I could see from a distance that something was wrong. There were people at the door. Mrs. Patricia was on the porch, waving frantically, yelling something we couldn't yet hear. The sheriff sped up. We arrived and got out of the car, running. Mrs. Patricia's eyes were red, her face wet with tears. Thank God you're here. Thank God. It's Clara. She. My heart stopped. I ran into the house and saw it the worst sight in the world. Another one for my collection on this terrible day. Clara was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Her eyes were closed, her face white as a sheet. Her belly, my God, her belly was stained with blood. Dark, thick blood that had run down her legs and formed that puddle on the floor. I fell to my knees beside her. Clara, Clara, wake up. For God's sake, wake up. I held her hand. It was cold, too cold. Mrs. Patricia spoke behind me, sobbing. She started feeling pain, a very strong pain in her stomach. I tried to help. I made tea, put a warm cloth on her, I prayed. But the blood started coming, so much blood, and she fainted. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. The sheriff came in, saw the scene, the blood on the floor, Clara unconscious, and turned to the investigator with a firm voice. "Let's go. She needs a doctor. Now. Help me carry her to the car." We picked Clara up carefully. I held her under her arms. The investigator took her by the legs. She was limp, heavy, her body without any strength. Her head lolled to the side, her hair stuck to her sweaty face. We carried her to the car, placed her in the back seat. I got in behind her, sat down, and put her in my lap, holding her tightly. The sheriff got in the front and started the engine. "Hold her tight, Mr. Arthur. I'm going to drive fast." And he floored it. The car lurched forward, kicking up dust, jolting over the bumps in the road. I held Clara, hugging her, feeling her body tremble in my lap. I prayed in my head, and halfway there, she woke up. Her eyes flew open suddenly, wide with fear. She moaned softly, a pain cutting through her body. "Clara, Clara, I'm here, my love. I'm here with you," I said, holding her tighter. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, her mouth trembling. "Arthur, it hurts so much. The baby. Her voice came out hoarse, weak, full of desperation. "He's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're on our way to the hospital. We're almost there." I was lying. I didn't know if she would be okay. I didn't know anything. I only knew there was a lot of blood. Too much blood. Clara started screaming. Screams of pain, screams of despair that tore through the silence of the road. She held her belly with both hands curled up and cried non-stop. My son, don't let him die, Arthur. For the love of God, don't let him." I cried with her, unable to say anything. I just held her, rocked her gently, prayed softly, asking God for mercy, asking God not to take our son. The sheriff drove fast, but the road was bad, full of potholes and turns. Clara screamed louder, and the blood kept coming, staining her clothes, staining my clothes, running onto the car seat. It made a mess. It felt like an eternity, 40 minutes that felt like 40 hours. Clara screamed the whole way, struggling in my lap, begging me to save our child. When we arrived at the hospital in the city, the sheriff honked, yelled, called for help. Nurses came with a stretcher, took Clara from my lap, and placed her on it. She was calmer now, weaker. Her eyes couldn't focus properly. Her voice was barely a whisper. I heard the sheriff saying she had lost a lot of blood. They rushed her inside. I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me. "You have to wait out here, sir. The doctor will take care of her." And I stood there in the hallway, my clothes stained with blood, my hands shaking, my heart heavy, praying, begging, waiting. I don't know how much time passed. I just know it was too long, until the door opened, and a nurse appeared with a serious, tired face. "Are you Clara's husband?" "Yes, I am." "How is she?" "The baby." She sighed deeply. "The doctor wants to speak with you. You can come with me." I followed her down the hall. We entered a room and I saw Clara lying on a hospital bed, pale, her eyes red from crying. And in her arms, my God, in her arms was a tiny baby wrapped in a white cloth. The doctor was beside the bed. A middle-aged man with glasses, his lab coat stained with blood. He looked at me with that expression doctors have when the news isn't good. "Mr. Arthur, your wife's water broke. She went into premature labor. We delivered the baby, but he didn't make it. He was stillborn. There was no heartbeat, no breath, nothing we could do. I'm so sorry." I felt my legs give way. I approached the bed slowly. Clara looked at me with eyes full of pain, guilt, and despair, and held out her arms, offering me the baby. I took him. He was a tiny boy, perfect, with his little fingers curled, his eyes closed as if he was sleeping. But he was cold, so cold, and he didn't move. He didn't cry, he didn't breathe. I held him in my arms, pressed him against my chest, and I cried. I cried like I had never cried in my life. I cried for my son who would never open his eyes, who would never call me Dad, who would never have the chance to live. Dear Lord, what a horrible feeling that was. Clara held out her arms, wanting him back. I gave him to her. She held him tight, kissed his little forehead, rocked him as if he were alive, and cried softly, murmuring, "Forgive me, my son, forgive me. Mommy couldn't protect you, forgive me." The doctor came closer, touched my shoulder. "Mr. Arthur, you need to go to the clerk's office. You need to file the baby's death certificate. It's mandatory. Even though he was stillborn, there has to be a record. Here at the hospital, we'll provide the declaration of death. Take it to the clerk's office, register it, and they'll give you the burial permit. I looked at him, not quite understanding. Burial. I would have to bury my son who never even got to live. What a tragedy. Can you give him a name? The doctor continued in a low voice. It's not mandatory, but it's your right to give the child a name, even if he was born like this, so he doesn't remain without an identity. I looked at Clara, she looked at me, and between tears she whispered, Samuel. I want to name him Samuel. I nodded slowly. Samuel, a beautiful name. The doctor carefully took the baby and carried him away. He said he would prepare the little body, make him presentable for us to say goodbye, and that afterward we could take him, that the hospital would give us a small, simple wooden box so we could bury him with dignity. I stayed there with Clara, sat on the edge of the bed, and held her hand. She cried non-stop, her whole body shaking. It's my fault, Arthur, it's my fault. I shouldn't have insisted on that garden. I shouldn't have pointed to that spot. It was because of all that our son died. Don't say that, Clara. It wasn't your fault. Clara needed to recover, take medicine, rest. She stayed there that night. But the doctor couldn't keep us for long. There was the issue of the baby. By law, the burial had to happen within 36 hours. And since it was a small town, with no proper place to store a body, they wanted to release him soon. The next day, very early, we were discharged. And we also received Samuel's little body in a small, light wooden box, closed, so light it felt like it weighed nothing, and the death certificate I needed to take to the clerk's office. I went there that same morning, registered the death. The man at the office did everything rather quickly, barely looking at me. He wrote down the name Samuel, son of Arthur and Clara, stillborn, and gave me the burial permit. We went back to the farm that same day. An officer drove us at the sheriff's request. Clara was silent, clutching the little box, not letting go. I stared out the window, watching the road go by, feeling the weight of it all. When we arrived, the house was empty, silent. The officer asked if we wanted him to notify Mr. Dale and Mrs. Patricia. We said yes. What bothered me was that we would have to bury our son in that cursed land. We got home in the morning. The sun had barely dried the dew from the yard. Clara, her body still weak, held our son's little box with all the delicacy in the world. No one spoke. No one cried anymore, as if all the tears had already been shed in the hospital. Clara looked at me and asked, Arthur, bury him right next to where your grandmother was. Don't leave our son alone. They're all the same family, all the same blood. I simply agreed. I took the shovel and went to the patch of earth next to my grandmother's hole. I dug slowly, feeling the weight of each lift of my arm like a prayer, like a plea for forgiveness. The ground there seemed even heavier than usual, as if the farm itself resisted accepting another life. Mr. Dale and Mrs. Patricia arrived later. I was still digging. They had called the closest neighbors, who stood in silence, watching from a distance respectfully. The box was terrifyingly light. That is a weight no father should ever know, the weight of a life that never began. It felt like I was holding nothing but air and shattered dreams. Clara, trembling like a leaf in a storm, placed a tiny white cloth inside, along with a single fragile wildflower she had plucked from the weeds. She kissed the wood, a silent, agonizing goodbye that echoed louder than any scream. When she handed him to me, her eyes were dry, hollowed out by a grief too deep for tears. I stepped into the grave I had dug, and as I lowered my son into that cursed earth, I felt a piece of my own soul being buried with him. There is no pain quite like what Arthur and Clara are feeling right now, a hollow ache that money or land can never fix. If you are wondering how a marriage survives this kind of devastation, stay with us, because their darkest hour is about to lead to a revelation that changes everything. If you are listening to this and have your children nearby, hold them tight right now, because the hollow thud of dirt hitting that tiny wooden box, that is a sound that will haunt a father's heart until his dying breath. Mrs. Patricia approached, knelt beside Clara, and said softly, "Now this little angel is no longer alone, and you did what was right, Clara. The love of family is worth more than anything." I covered the box with earth slowly. Not a word left my mouth, just a knot tightening everything inside me. The couple stood there, crying for our pain, not trying to console, just sharing it. 3 neighbors quietly prayed the Lord's Prayer, each to themselves. That day, the wind stopped. The air in the house stood still, heavy. It was as if time had held its breath, not daring to move in the face of so much sadness. Clara disappeared inside, walking slowly without looking at anyone. I stood there, blaming myself in silence, thinking that if I had listened to my wife, none of this would have happened. The pain of guilt is one of the saddest things there is. About 3 or 4 days after we buried Samuel, I was in the yard trying to fix the chicken coop when I heard the rumble of an engine coming down the road. It was 7 in the morning, the sun still low, the mist clinging to the ground. I looked and saw the car coming up slowly, kicking up dust. It was my father's car. My heart sank. The police had notified them, and now they had come to see, to confirm, to face the truth that my father had run from his whole life. The car stopped at the gate. The door opened. My father stepped out of the car, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes red and sunken. My mother followed, clutching her rosary so tightly her knuckles were white. When my father saw me, he didn't wait for an explanation. He walked straight to me, tears already streaming down his face. "I know it's her, Arthur," he choked out, embracing me. "I feel it. And the dog. He buried them together, didn't he?" He didn't need a confirmation. The truth was written in the very air of that cursed place. The police hadn't even officially confirmed it, but he didn't need to see. He knew. Deep down, he had always known. We let go of each other. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. My mother came and hugged me too, but in silence. She wasn't crying, just holding that rosary, praying softly. We went into the house. My mother looked around, searching. "Where's Clara? Didn't she come to greet us?" I felt my throat tighten. I looked at the floor. She's in the room, she's lying down. She's not well. My mother frowned. "What happened? Is she sick? And the baby?" I couldn't hold it in. The tears came. "She lost the baby, Mom. We lost our son." My voice came out hoarse, broken. "It was a boy. We named him Samuel. We buried him here in the yard, next to where we found Grandma." My mother put a hand to her mouth, stifling a scream. My father was paralyzed. His face turned white, his eyes wide, as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Samuel," he whispered, the color draining from his face. "You named him Samuel?" His voice trembled so violently it scared me. I nodded, confused. "Yes, Clara chose it." "Why?" My father closed his eyes as if in physical pain, whispering to a ghost I couldn't see, "Because that was his name too." I stared at him, confused. "His name? Who?" "My brother," he whispered. "My little brother, Samuel." There was so much pain in that moment that I couldn't process anything else. I had an uncle I never knew, an uncle with the same name as my son. My mother looked devastated. They both hugged me at the same time, and we cried together. My mother said later, "Take me to her. Let me see Clara." We went to the room. Clara was lying on her side, facing the wall, her hand where her belly used to be. When she saw her mother-in-law, she tried to get up, but she didn't have the strength. My mother rushed to her, sat on the edge of the bed, and hugged her. "My child, my dear child." My mother cried with her, rocking her as if she were a child. "I'm here now. I'll take care of you. Everything will be all right." Clara cried in her arms, cried out everything she still had bottled up, and my mother stayed there, holding her, stroking her hair, doing what one mother does for another. In silence, without questions, just love. My father and I left the room, leaving the two of them alone. We went to the kitchen. He sat in a chair, running a hand over his tired face. "Where is it, Arthur? Where did you find her?" "In the yard, Dad. Come, I'll show you." We went outside. We walked slowly to the spot. The earth was still disturbed, where the police had dug, where they had removed Grandma's bones. Beside it, a small mound of fresh earth, the size of a child who never got to grow. My father stopped, looked, just stood there, breathing deeply, trying to control himself. "There?" he asked, pointing to the larger hole. "There, Dad. That's where I found her. Grandma's bones were there, and next to them, the bones of her dog, buried together." I pointed to the small mound. "And here, next to it, this is where we buried Samuel. Clara asked to bury him with her. She said they were all the same family, all the same blood. He knelt down, touched the earth with his hand, slowly, respectfully. My mother, and now my grandson. His voice was a whisper. All here, all in this cursed land. I stood beside him, not knowing what to say. After a while I told him, "Dad, if it weren't for Clara, we would have never known. I was going to dig where the old garden was, but she insisted it had to be there. She pointed to the exact spot, as if something had shown her, as if Grandma had called to her." My father looked at me, his eyes full of tears and guilt. It was God who showed Clara, Arthur. My mother couldn't stay hidden there any longer. God used Clara to bring the truth to light, so my mother wouldn't be alone in that hole anymore. He looked up at the sky, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for calling someone. Forgive me. Forgive me for leaving you here alone with him. Forgive me." He turned to me, gripped my shoulders with both hands, looked me in the eyes, and what I saw there was a pain that went beyond losing his mother. It was guilt, deep, heavy guilt. "Arthur, forgive me, son, forgive me." His voice came out in a desperate whisper. It was because of all this that Clara couldn't take it. It was the weight of this damn story, of this buried secret, that made her lose the baby. This land, this cursed farm, it took my mother, and now it has taken my grandson. He sobbed and hugged me tightly. "I should never have given you this inheritance. I should never have let you come here. It's my fault." Suddenly, Walter's lifelong silence makes terrible, tragic sense. He wasn't a cold father. He was a broken child protecting his own family from the horrors he endured. This confession changes the entire perspective of the story, doesn't it? It's all my fault. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to comfort him, because deep down, my dear, I felt it too. I felt that that farm had killed our son, that the weight of those secrets, those buried horrors, had been too much for Clara's fragile body to bear, and that we had paid the price for a truth that needed to come out. But I couldn't blame my father. He didn't know. He had fled that place precisely to escape, and now he was discovering that his mother never had that chance. I felt that something was about to change, that the disturbed earth had also disturbed things inside my father, things he had kept hidden his whole life, and that now, facing his own mother's grave and the new guilt he carried on his shoulders, he wouldn't be able to keep them hidden any longer. We went back to the house in silence. My mother was still in the room with Clara. We sat in the kitchen. My father rested his elbows on the table and covered his face with his hands. He stayed like that for a while, and when he removed his hands, I saw he had been crying again. "Arthur," he said, his voice hoarse and tired, "there are things I never told you, things I never told anyone, not even your mother, really. Things I tried to forget, to bury, to pretend never happened." He looked at me, and I saw in his eyes an ancient, profound pain. "But now I have to speak. I have to tell you, because you have the right to know. The price you and Clara paid is my fault, and all of this happened because of my secrets. You need to understand what happened in this house." My mother came into the kitchen and sat with us. She said that Clara had fallen asleep. "My dear, my father was finally going to tell it, to open that wound he had spent his life trying to close. And I'm going to tell you now, just as he told me, without adding or inventing anything, just the truth, the raw, painful truth that was buried on that farm, along with my grandmother's bones." My mother knew some things. She knew her father-in-law had been violent, that her husband had run away from home young, that he held a deep resentment from his childhood, but she didn't know everything. She didn't know the worst of it. My father had never had the courage to tell her. He was ashamed. He was afraid. And there, in that kitchen, my mother would discover secrets about her husband she had never imagined, horrors she had never suspected. And I would discover that my father wasn't just my father. He was a survivor, a man who had been through hell and had somehow managed to come out alive on the other side. He began slowly in a low voice, his gaze lost on the wood of the table. He spoke of his father, old Leonard, my grandfather whom I had never known, and thank God I never did. He said he was a violent, cruel man who would beat them for anything. A wrong look, a word out of turn, a dropped plate. Anything was a reason for a beating. He said that when he was a little boy, his father would lock him and his mother in the cellar, that cellar that Clara had discovered, with the smell of wax and damp earth. They would stay down there, in the dark, with only candles for light. For a whole day, or two, sometimes 3. The old man would bring them food, stale bread, water, and then lock them up again. He'd say they weren't good, that they didn't behave, that they needed to learn to obey. They relieved themselves right there on then. About 2 months after we moved in, Clara found out she was pregnant. Again, 2 or 3 months pregnant. She probably got pregnant at my parents' house on the floor. Later, when they were let out, his mother would go back and clean it all up. And then my father paused, took a deep breath, and said something that made me freeze. He said he had a brother, a younger brother, Samuel, who was 7 years old. I was paralyzed. A brother. I had an uncle, Samuel, the same name as my boy. Why had no one ever told me? I looked at my mother, Mrs. Helen. She was staring at her husband, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with the same shock I felt. She didn't know this. She was learning it right alongside me. I was about to speak, to ask, but my father continued, and I didn't have the heart to interrupt. I couldn't. He needed to talk. He needed to let it all out. He said that Samuel was tiny, skinny, afraid of everything, that his father beat him too, locked him in the cellar with them, that their mother, Mrs. Josephine, tried to protect her 2 sons as best she could, but she couldn't. The old man was too strong, too violent, and she was afraid. Afraid of dying, afraid he would kill the boys. My father closed his eyes, clenched his fists on the table, and told us that after a while, his father started doing worse things, much worse. His voice broke, shattering into 1,000 painful pieces. He couldn't look at me. He looked at his hands he had scrubbed raw for years trying to wash away the memory. He didn't just beat me, Arthur, he whispered, the words dragging themselves out of his throat like shards of glass. He used me. Since I was 13. The air left the room. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, filled with a horror so pure it made me nauseous. My father, my strong, silent father, wasn't just a survivor of violence. He was a survivor of a monster who had stolen his innocence in the vilest way possible. My mother put a hand to her mouth and started crying softly. My father didn't look at us. He just stared at the table, at his own hands, as if he were ashamed, as if it were his fault. He said his father did it without his mother knowing, that he would take him to the bedroom, to the barn, anywhere away from her. And he'd say that if he told his mother, he would lock the boy in the cellar forever. He would kill his mother, he would kill his brother, and my father believed him. He knew the old man was capable. He told us with a broken voice, disgusted with himself, that his father forced him to do things no child should ever have to do, forced him to touch, to perform oral sex, to submit. He said my father was in agony, filled with shame and fear, that he bled, that he cried, that he begged his father to stop. But the old man didn't stop. He never stopped. I was crying without being able to stop. The turn that conversation took couldn't have been worse, my dear. My mother was crying too, hugging herself, trembling all over. And my father continued, like someone who needs to vomit poison, like someone who needs to unload a burden before it kills him. He told us about his little brother, Samuel. He was only 7 when he fell into the well. My father was the one who pulled the small, cold body out of the water. They buried him in the town cemetery, in a tiny white coffin with no flowers. That was why my mother, your grandmother, refused to leave. She told me she couldn't leave Samuel alone in that town, couldn't abandon the only piece of her heart that was still pure. He said he had never felt a worse pain in his life, so much sorrow for his brother. The tragic echo of the name Samuel connects the father and son in a shared cycle of grief that is heartbreaking to witness. This confession completely reframes Walter from a distant figure into a survivor of unspeakable horror. But the story isn't finished yet. Listen to what happened to their loyal dog, the only creature that dared to stand between them and the monster. He said his father, Mr. Leonard, pretended to grieve at the funeral. He cried in front of the neighbors, played the part of the bereaved father, but at home, he didn't care at all. He said life goes on, that a man can't be crying over a dead son when there's work to be done. And he went back to beating his mother, locking my father in the cellar, abusing him. My father told us about their dog. He said it was part of the family, that it protected his mother and him, that it would bark when his father came home drunk, that it would stand in front of his mother when the old man was about to hit her. But the dog was afraid of Leonard. The old man would kick the dog, beat it with a stick, constantly threatened to kill it. He'd say one day he was going to put a bullet in that damn dog and be done with it. My father took a deep breath, wiped his tears with the back of his hand, and said that when he got a little older, when he turned 18, he ran away. He ran away to the city without looking back. He got a job at a general store, met my mother, fell in love. They married quickly. No party, no honeymoon, nothing, just to get away, to start a new life far from that hell. He said he tried to convince his mother to come with him, begged her to leave everything and go with them. But Mrs. Josephine refused. She said she couldn't abandon the place, that if she left, Leonard would kill all the animals, set fire to the house, destroy everything, and that she couldn't leave Samuel's grave alone. She couldn't abandon her son. My father cried like a child. He said he, left with a broken heart, with guilt eating him up inside, that he knew he was leaving his mother to die, but he didn't have the courage to stay. He couldn't take it anymore. If he stayed, he would die too, or he would kill his father, one of the two. He said he regretted not killing the demon before he killed his mother. He said the dog was about 8 years old when he left. So my father calculated that his mother must have died shortly after he left, because a dog doesn't live much longer than 10, maybe 15 years at most. And he knew, he was certain, that the dog had defended his mother to the end, that it had tried to protect her and had died with her, because the dog would never abandon its owner. Never. My father said that when he received my letter, the one saying his mother had left, had run away, disappeared, abandoned everything, he was actually happy, relieved. He thought she had finally found the courage to escape, to start a new life away from that monster. He thought she was alive somewhere, maybe living with her sister in Tennessee, living in peace. He was even making plans to find her address and see his mother again. But that hope was short-lived. The truth was different. She had never left. She had never run away. She never had the chance. Mr. Leonard had killed her. He had killed her and the dog. He had buried them both in the yard and had lied. He had invented that story about her running away so no one would look, so no one would investigate, so no one would know. My father raised his eyes, looked at me, and I saw in them a pain that was immeasurable, a pain of decades, of a lifetime carrying that alone, and he asked for forgiveness. He asked for forgiveness for giving me that cursed inheritance, that damned farm, that land stained with blood and horror. I stood there, listening, feeling the weight of the blood that ran in my veins, the blood of a victim and the blood of a monster. I was sobbing, unable to stop. My mother, Mrs. Helen, was crying too, holding her husband, comforting him, holding him, giving him the love and comfort he never had in his childhood. And so many absurd, unbelievable things were revealed there in that kitchen that I felt my whole life had been a lie, that I knew nothing, that my father, that quiet, silent man whom I always thought was just shy, carried within him horrors that no human being should ever have to bear. I looked at my father and understood for the first time his lifelong silence. The silence was nothing against me. It wasn't coldness, it wasn't distance, it was pain. A pain impossible to carry, impossible to speak of, impossible to share. It was a desperate attempt to bury the past, to pretend it had never happened, to build a new life on the ruins of the old one. But now the ruins had been unearthed, and we would have to deal with them. After that confession from my father, after everything that came to light, I didn't want to stay there anymore. I couldn't. That farm breathed too many memories, memories of pain, of horror, of death. And especially now, my dear, that place was where Clara had lost our baby, where my first son had been buried, where our dream had been buried along with him. I took a deep breath and said, "Dad, I want to leave, sell everything, take the money, and start over. I don't want anything more from this land. I don't want anything more from this place. Will you let me?" My father didn't take long to answer. He took a deep breath and nodded. "This place has already taken what it was going to take, Arthur. There's nothing left here for us. Only pain, only sadness. Sell it. Do whatever you think is best. I don't want anything from here either." Clara, when I told her, just agreed with a tired look. She had barely spoken since she lost the baby. She just stayed quiet, staring into space, her hand on her empty belly. But when I said we were leaving, I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes. It was small, but it was there. I decided we would leave that very day. We couldn't stay even one more night there. We would go back to the city with my parents in their car, and then we would figure out what to do, how to sell, how to start over, how to move on. But before we left, there was one thing that needed to be resolved. The inquiry, the bones, the sheriff's office. My father and I went to the station in town together. We left the women at home, packing things up, closing up the house. When we arrived at the sheriff's office, the sheriff led us to his office. There was a desk piled with papers, an old fan in the corner, the smell of stale coffee in the air. He took a folder, opened it, and pulled out some papers. Mr. Walter. Arthur, the forensics report came in. I was waiting for you. It was done at the regional hospital by the medical examiner there. I'll read it to you. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. He said the bones were of an adult woman between 40 and 50 years of age, that she had died about 25, maybe 30 years ago, that the exact time was difficult to determine due to the condition of the bones and the time they were buried in the earth. And the worst part, he said there were puncture marks on 2 ribs and a cut at the base of the skull, consistent with stab wounds, multiple blows, extreme violence. My father closed his eyes, clenched his fists. I felt my stomach churn. She had been stabbed. My grandmother had been stabbed by her own husband and buried in the yard like trash. The sheriff continued. He said that among the collected items, there were 2 important things. He took out a small plastic bag and placed it on the desk. Inside was the white beaded rosary I had found and the wedding ring. He read slowly, respectfully. White beaded rosary with an oxidized metal crucifix and a simple yellow gold wedding band with the initials J and L engraved on the inside, possibly indicating the couple Josephine and Leonard Miller. My father opened his eyes, looked at the rosary, at the ring. His hand trembled as he picked up the bag. He looked at it closely, carefully, as if touching something sacred. "It's hers," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "It's my mother's rosary. She prayed with it every day." A white beaded rosary, just like this one. He touched the bag again, caressing it, and the ring. She wore it every day, never took it off. She said it was the only gift my father ever gave her that was worth anything. He closed his eyes. A tear rolled down his cheek. "It's hers. I'm sure of it. It's my mother." The sheriff nodded respectfully. "Then it's confirmed. It's Mrs. Josephine, your mother. My condolences, Mr. Walter." He picked up another paper and placed it in front of us. "You need to sign here, acknowledging the items and authorizing the closure of the inquiry. Since Mr. Leonard is already deceased, there's no way to prosecute or arrest anyone. The case will be closed as a homicide, with a known perpetrator but no possibility of trial." We signed, me, my father, the sheriff, as a witness, and that was it. It was officially closed. My grandmother had been murdered, and her killer had died without paying, without being tried, without being punished. The sheriff said the body, the bones, had been released for burial, that we could pick them up from the regional hospital. They would be provided in a simple wooden crate, supplied by the county, and that a patrol car could transport them to the cemetery in our hometown if we wished. My father agreed. He said he wanted to bury his mother with dignity, in a real cemetery, with a headstone, a name, flowers, not buried like an animal in the backyard. We went to the hospital and picked up the crate. It was small, light, weighed almost nothing, just bones. Old, dry bones that had once been a person, a woman, a mother, my grandmother. The patrol car took us to the city where my parents lived. But before we left for good, we made one stop. We needed to say goodbye to the friends we had made there, Mr. Dale and Mrs. Patricia. We hugged and cried. That couple had been more than neighbors. They had been friends, family, support. They had been there in our worst moments, had helped us when no one else could. "You'll be okay," Mrs. Patricia said, holding Clara's hands. "God will take care of you. He'll give you strength. You're young. You'll have other children." Mr. Dale hugged my father and held him tight. "Mr. Walter, may your mother's soul rest in peace now. She deserved it, and you deserve peace too. Don't carry this guilt anymore. You did what you could." We thanked them, promised we would come back to visit, that we wouldn't forget them. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't be back. I couldn't. That place had taken too much from me. There was no going back. We arrived in my parents' city in the middle of the night. We slept little. Early in the morning, My mother went to call Clara's family, her mother, Mrs. Margaret, and her brothers. They came running as soon as they heard. They hugged Clara, cried with her over the loss of the baby, comforted her, held her, gave her strength. That day we held the burial. It was quiet, simple, no wake, no mass, nothing, just family. Me, Clara, my parents, Clara's family, and no one else. We didn't want to draw attention, didn't want the story to spread. We didn't want people talking, gossiping, making things up. The coffin was small, simple, made of light wood, unadorned. We took it to the cemetery, to the grave that had been dug in the early morning, and we buried her slowly, with respect, with love. My father placed a simple marker, just the name Josephine Miller, and the date of birth he remembered, and the estimated date of death from the forensics report. He said he had ordered a granite one, but it wasn't ready yet. We stood there around the grave. We prayed the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary. We asked God to have mercy on her soul. We asked for forgiveness for her having been buried for so long, forgotten, alone. And we thanked God for revealing the truth, for using Clara to bring Grandma back, to give her rest. And so, my grandmother Josephine finally had a grave with a name, a place of rest, a place where we could visit, bring flowers, light a candle, pray for her. She was no longer buried in the yard, hidden as if she were nothing. She had dignity now. She had peace. And we, my dear, we could also begin to have peace. The truth had come out, the secret had been revealed, and now we could slowly try to move on, try to heal, try to live. After the burial, after everything that had happened, we stayed with my parents. My father and mother opened their doors to us, without asking anything, without demanding anything. They just took us in a way they never had before. The atmosphere in the house was quiet, but it was a good, comforting silence. Everyone tried to carry on with their lives without touching on what was left behind. We didn't talk about the farm, we didn't talk about the baby, we didn't talk about anything. We just lived one day at a time. I got a job at the general store in town, the same one my father had worked at when he was young, when he had run away. The pay was small, really meager, but I brought it all home, helped out however I could. I bought food, paid bills, did what a family man should do. But at the same time, we needed to sort out the farm situation. We couldn't just leave it there, sitting, abandoned. We had to sell it, to get rid of that place once and for all. But selling a farm, my dear, isn't like selling a house in the city. You don't just put up a sign and have a buyer show up the next day. It's a process. It's bureaucracy. It's papers, certificates, county offices, lawyers, a whole lot of things. We hired a lawyer from the city, a serious, experienced man who knew about land, about rural properties. He explained that first we had to do the probate, list everything on the farm, the house, the land, the improvements, everything. Then get certificates of good standing, see if there were any back taxes, any debts, that sort of thing. And only then, with everything in order, could we list it for sale. The process dragged on. Months and months of going back and forth to the city, my father and I, to sign papers, get signatures notarized, follow up with the lawyer. It was tiring, slow, frustrating, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, the lawyer handled the listings. He put ads in the paper, spoke with realtors, spread the word that there was a large farm for sale, good land, well located, and people started showing up. Interested people, people who wanted to see it, appraise it, negotiate. Some people went to visit and then backed out. They said the house was too old, that it would be too much work to renovate. Some thought the price was too high, some wanted to pay in installments, and we wouldn't accept that. It went on and on until the right buyer came along. He was an investor from out of state, a businessman who wanted land for agriculture. He went there, saw everything, appraised it, and made an offer, a good cash offer. No nonsense. We accepted. The sale took 1 year and 2 months to be finalized. 1 year and 2 months of bureaucracy, paperwork and waiting, but in the end it worked out. The sale included the entire farm, the main house, the land, the surroundings, everything. It legally closed the family inheritance, ending it once and for all. The buyer paid in cash through the lawyer, who handled the transfer and closed the probate. The deed was already in my name because of the transfer my father himself had made. So, the negotiation was quick, without dispute. The amount we received was high, very high for the time. It was enough money to change our family's life, to truly start over. Even though I was the sole owner on paper, I decided to split the money with my father, half for him, half for me. Because that farm was his inheritance, not mine, and because he had supported me through that entire horrible process, had been by my side, had held Clara's hand when she needed it. We shared that pain. It was only fair to share the money. My father cried when I told him this. He tried to refuse, said the farm was mine, that he had given it to me of his own free will, but I insisted, and in the end, he accepted. He used his share to pay off the mortgage on the house where he lived with my mother. They had bought it with great sacrifice, paying installments every month for years, and now, with the money from the sale, they could pay it all off at once, settle that old debt, and secure a peaceful future for themselves. With my share, Clara and I bought our own house. A nice house, well located, on a quiet street in town. It wasn't a big house, not a rich person's house, but it was ours. It had a yard, a porch, enough space to start a new life. It was exactly what Clara had always wanted. A house in the city, with neighbors nearby, with a school nearby, with a church nearby, far from the woods, far from the loneliness, far from that cursed farm. We moved on a Saturday morning. My parents helped carry the boxes, arrange the furniture, get everything in place. And when it was all done, we sat on the porch drinking coffee, looking at the street. And for the first time in a long time, I saw Clara smile. A small, shy smile, but it was a real smile. And then, about 2 months after we moved in, Clara found out she was pregnant, again. 2 or 3 months pregnant. She must have gotten pregnant right after we settled into our new home. The news brought both hope and fear in equal measure. Hope of having a child, of watching him grow, of being a real father, but fear too. Fear of losing again, fear of not being able to protect, fear of not being strong enough. But this time was different. The pregnancy was smooth. Clara ate well, slept well, did everything right. My mother and my mother-in-law took care of her, spoiled her, gave her strength. Months later, a beautiful, healthy, crying baby girl was born. We named her Emily. Emily's arrival wasn't just a birth. It was the final confirmation that the darkness of the farm had truly been left behind. It is a relief to see that life has finally won over death. But now that their family is complete, they need a way to sustain this new happiness, and the answer is about to come from a very humble suggestion. That pregnancy, that birth, marked the true new beginning for our entire family. It was a chance to build something new after so much suffering, to plant life where there had only been death, to have hope where there had only been fear. And we grabbed that chance with both hands and never let go. After we became financially stable with the money from the farm sale, Clara and I thought about what to do. We wanted to invest in something real, something that honored where we came from. We sat around the kitchen table one evening, remembering the early days of our marriage before the farm, before the inheritance when I had lost my job and we were nearly evicted. Back then, Mrs. Margaret had taken us in and fed us when we had nothing but empty pockets. She had saved us with her cooking. Looking at her now, playing with baby Emily, Clara smiled. "Mom," she said, "your food saved us back then. Maybe it can help others now." That's when Mrs. Margaret's eyes lit up. "A restaurant," she whispered. "Arthur, with the money from the farm, we could finally open a place of our own." He said any son of Walter's was welcome there. The work was hard, carrying sacks of rice, beans, sugar, organizing stock, helping customers, you know. I would go to work, and Clara would stay home taking care of little Emily. I was afraid to spend that money from the bank, afraid it would run out and the family would be left with nothing. So, we lived on my salary, which had gone up a bit, but we didn't touch that money. That's when my mother-in-law showed up, Mrs. Margaret, Clara's mom. I need to tell you about her, my dear, because Mrs. Margaret was a crucial part of our lives. She was the one who helped us when we had nothing. She was the one who supported our relationship from the beginning, when everyone else doubted it, you know. When I met Clara, we were just kids. We played together in the street, ran barefoot in the mud, played with a ball made of socks. As we grew up, that childhood friendship turned into something else. It turned into love, a beautiful, simple love of poor people who had nothing, but had everything. When I asked her to marry me, my dear, I had nothing to offer, nothing at all. I had no house, no savings, nothing. I just had the desire to get married, to build a life with her. And Clara accepted. She accepted knowing it would be hard, that we would face hardship, that there would be no luxury, but she accepted anyway. We got married in a simple church. No reception, no honeymoon, nothing. Then we went to live in a rented place, a tiny little shack in the back of a lot, and we were happy there. It was work that required care, attention, a steady hand, and I liked it. I liked seeing a blank piece of paper turn into something beautiful, something useful. Mr. Roger was a good, fair man. He paid on time, treated his employees with respect, but the salary was small, my dear, very small. It was barely enough to pay the rent on that shack and buy groceries for the month. There was nothing left over, nothing at all. We lived on a shoestring, counting pennies, doing calculations on paper to see if we could afford this or that, but we managed. Clara was a magician with money. She worked miracles, I swear. She'd go to the butcher shop at the end of the day, as the butcher was closing up, and buy the bones nobody wanted. Big beef bones, with a little meat still attached, some sinew, little bits of marrow. The butcher sold them for next to nothing, because otherwise he'd just throw them away. And Clara would bring those bones home, put them in a big pot with water, salt, garlic, onion, tomato, and grits. Just thinking about it makes my mouth water. She would buy cornmeal, a bag of cornmeal that lasted the whole month, and every day she'd make grits, creamy grits, well seasoned, with a little bit of fat, salt, garlic, and she'd eat it with sautéed collard greens that she'd buy at the market, the leaves that were a bit wilted, and that the vendor sold for cheaper. It was good, it was tasty, it filled you up, it warmed your body. We ate beans and rice every day, my dear, every single day. White rice, pinto or black beans, depending on what was cheapest at the market, and it was a feast. We were crazy about each other. We were truly happy, because we had love, and that, my dear, that was worth more than any money in the world. But then, in less than 4 months, in that little shack, disaster struck. I was fired from my job. The owner said he had run out of money, that he couldn't pay anyone anymore, that everyone was being laid off, and I was let go without notice, without anything. I was jobless from one moment to the next, and without a job, I couldn't pay the rent. I tried to talk to the landlord, asked for another month to find another job. I promised I'd pay on time, but he wouldn't hear of it. He said he wasn't a charity, that if I didn't pay, I had to leave, and he gave me 1 week to vacate. We were evicted, my dear. They put us out on the street. A few bundles of clothes, the old mattress, the little stove. We just sat there on the sidewalk, not knowing what to do, where to go. Clara was crying softly, ashamed of everyone seeing us. And I, my dear, I felt like the worst man in the world. I felt useless, like a failure, incapable of taking care of my wife. That's when I went to ask for help. First, I went to my father's house, knocked on the door, explained the situation. My father was very quiet, looked at my mother, looked at the floor, and said he didn't want us living there. He gave me some money and told me to go to a boarding house or try to rent another place, but it wasn't much. I was desperate. I looked at my mother, pleading for help with my eyes. She looked at her husband, opened her mouth to say something, but fell silent. Back then, my dear, my mother obeyed everything my father said. Even if she disagreed, even if it hurt her, she wouldn't contradict him. That's how it worked. The man commanded, the woman obeyed. I left there with my head down, shame burning in my chest, and I went to my mother-in-law's house, Mrs. Margaret's. She lived in a simple house with her other children, a cramped, modest place, but full of love. When I got there and told her what had happened, she didn't think twice. You're staying here with me. I don't even want to hear about you going anywhere else. This is your home too. I gave her all the money my father had given me to help out that month. I said I'd find a job, that we didn't want to be a burden. Mrs. Margaret took me in, my dear. She gave me food, she gave me shelter, she gave me affection. She treated me like a son. She never made me feel like a burden, never threw it in my face that I was living on her charity, never humiliated me. On the contrary, she encouraged me. She told me I'd find another job soon, that God would bless us, that we'd get back on our feet, even though she had been disappointed by the husband who had abandoned her with young children. She was never one to mistreat anyone, to take it out on anyone. And she said something I'll never forget. "Arthur, love is worth more than money. You two love each other, and with love, hard work, and faith, you'll build a good life. It may take time, but it will happen. God will bless you." And that's how Mrs. Margaret saved us. She gave us a home when we had none. She gave us hope when all we had was despair, and she never ever made us feel like less than we were. And when the farm inheritance came along, Mrs. Margaret cried. She cried because she would be far from her daughter, but she supported us. She told Clara to go, that it was our chance to have something of our own, that she would pray every day for us to be well. And now, after everything that had happened, after we had returned to the city, Mrs. Margaret showed up to help again. She came every day to visit Clara, sat with her, talked with her, made her laugh. And little by little, Clara came back to life. One day we were sitting in the kitchen, me, Clara, my mother, and Mrs. Margaret, and she threw out an idea. "Arthur, why don't you two open a restaurant? You have the money from the farm sale, and Clara is such a good cook. This girl inherited my talent. We could do it together. I'll teach you, I'll help, and you two can run the business." I looked at Clara, she looked at me, and I saw a sparkle in her eye, a sparkle of hope, of will, of life. "Do you think it would work, Mom?" I asked. "Yes, it will. Good food always sells, and if it's honest, hearty, well-seasoned food, made with love, people will come back. They always come back." My mother, Mrs. Helen, agreed. She said she would help too, that we'd do it together, that it would work out. And that's how the idea was born, the idea of opening a home-style restaurant. We started looking for a location. We walked all over the city, looking at places, asking for prices, until we found a good spot near the bus station. It was a small, somewhat old space, but well located. A lot of people passed by there, travelers, workers, families. It was perfect. We negotiated the rent. The owner asked for a certain amount. We managed to get it down a little. We closed the deal and started renovating. We painted the walls, fixed the tables, bought used but good chairs that we sanded and painted. We put in a stove, a refrigerator, large pots. Mrs. Margaret brought her recipes, her spices, her kitchen secrets, and we put it all together slowly, with care. My brothers-in-law were always there with us. My father was the only one who didn't help because he worked elsewhere. We needed a name. We thought about it until I said, "Let's call it Margaret's Kitchen," in honor of my mother-in-law, who gave us the idea, who always supported us. Mrs. Margaret cried, said she didn't deserve it, that it was silly, but we insisted, and it was decided. Margaret's Kitchen. We opened on a Saturday morning. I was nervous, sweating bullets. Would people come? Would they like it? Would we be able to pay the rent at the end of the month? But people came, my dear. A lot of people came. Workers who knew Mrs. Margaret's cooking from her lunch deliveries, family friends, curious neighbors who passed by, saw the crowd, and smelled that delicious aroma. On the first day, we filled the place. We served over 50 meals, and at the end of the day, when we counted the money, we had made a profit. A small one, but it was a profit. Clara was radiant, and so was Mrs. Margaret. My mother helped all day, washing dishes, serving customers, doing everything, and I stayed at the cash register, taking orders, taking payments, greeting everyone. Emily stayed in her stroller, nursing and sleeping a lot. The beginning was hard, I won't lie. We woke up in the middle of the night, 3 or 4 a.m. Clara and Mrs. Margaret would go to the kitchen and start preparing everything. I would go to the market, buy the meat, the vegetables, the greens, come back, help carry pots, light the stove. And at 11 o'clock we opened the doors. The menu was simple, the same honest food that had saved us when we had nothing. We served fluffy rice, savory black beans, tender pot roast, and of course, Mrs. Margaret's famous creamy grits, the very recipe that had kept us warm in our coldest days. It wasn't fancy, but it was real, and people could taste the resilience in every bite, and the price was honest. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't too cheap, it was fair. Everyone could eat there, from the construction worker to the shop owner, and people liked it. They liked it a lot. They started coming back. Every day we had old customers returning and bringing friends, bringing family. Word of mouth spread. The food at Margaret's kitchen is amazing. You have to go try it. And the restaurant filled up. In 3 months, we couldn't handle it on our own anymore. There was a line out the door at lunchtime, tables full all the time, and we were working ourselves to the bone inside. We were a good team, you know. Clara, my mother, and Mrs. Margaret in the kitchen. Logan was in the kitchen helping to carry pots, wash vegetables, chop seasonings. Wyatt was waiting tables, bringing out plates, taking orders. And Mason was washing dishes, which was the hardest but most necessary job. I was at the register, running from one side to the other. After a while, when business picked up even more, we had to hire more people from outside. We hired a young woman to help in the kitchen, another to wait tables, and another young man to wash dishes. The business was growing, and thank God, we were able to pay everyone properly. I discovered during this time that I had a knack for dealing with people. I didn't have much education, wasn't well read, but I had something money can't buy. I knew how to treat people well. I greeted everyone who came in. "Good morning, Mr. Joseph. How's the family? Mrs. Mary, good to see you again. Hey, Joey, how was your day at work?" I remembered people's names. I remembered their stories. I'd ask about the son who was studying, the mother who was sick, the brother who had traveled. And people liked it. They liked being treated with respect, with kindness, with attention. They weren't just another customer. They were people. People with names, with lives, with stories. It is heartwarming to see how Arthur used the dark isolation of his past to fuel a business built on genuine human connection. He proved that their success wasn't just about the food, but about the dignity they served with every plate. But as the years pass and the family grows, you have to wonder, how will this new legacy of kindness reshape the generations to come? The restaurant prospered. In a year, we were already earning a good living. We could pay the rent, pay the employees, buy the groceries, and still have some left over. We saved money, and after 2 years, we were able to buy the property. We stopped paying rent and became the owners of the building. It was a celebration when we signed the deed. Clara cried with joy, and so did Mrs. Margaret. And I, my dear, I felt a pride that could barely fit in my chest. We had done it. We had built something of our own, with hard work, with sweat, with honesty. We expanded the dining room, knocked down a wall, added more tables, enlarged the kitchen, and business just kept growing. Some days we served over 200 meals. 200. It was madness, but it was a good kind of madness. Mrs. Margaret worked with us every day. She was the heart of the restaurant. She woke up earlier than anyone, arrived at the kitchen, and immediately started seasoning the meat, preparing the beans, making the sauce. She had a gift for it all. And she taught Clara, she taught the employees, she passed her secrets on. The family grew over the years. We had 7 children in total, can you believe it? 4 girls and 3 boys. But over time, Mrs. Margaret started to get sick. She was getting on in years, moving into her late 50s, and a life of hard labor was finally taking its toll. She started having pain in her back, in her legs. She got tired easily. But she insisted, "I'm fine, don't worry, I can still handle it." But we could see she wasn't well. Until one day she fainted in the kitchen, fell to the floor, and hit her head. We rushed her to the hospital. The doctor ran some tests and said it was her heart, that she needed to rest, stop working, take care of her health. Mrs. Margaret cried. She said she didn't want to stop, that the restaurant needed her, that she still had so much to give. But we convinced her, "Mom, you've done more than enough. Now it's time to rest, to enjoy, to let us take care of you." And she accepted. She stopped working, but she didn't stop visiting. Every day she would drop by the restaurant, sit at a table in the corner, have a coffee, chat with the customers, and every now and then she'd go into the kitchen, taste the seasoning, offer a tip. "It's good, but it needs a pinch of salt." And she was always right. Clara took over the kitchen completely, and she was good, my dear, as good as her mother. She maintained the flavor, the care, kept everything just as Mrs. Margaret had taught. And the restaurant stayed packed. A few years later, Mrs. Margaret got worse. Her heart grew weaker, and she started spending more time in bed, more tired, weaker. We would visit her every day, bring her food, bring her affection, just be there with her. And one morning she passed away. She went to sleep and never woke up. Clara cried so much. I did too. We buried her with honor, with respect, with love, and on her tombstone we put a plaque, Mrs. Margaret, mother, grandmother, friend, founder of Margaret's Kitchen. May God have her in his glory. After she was gone, we carried on. We continued with the restaurant, with the work, with her dream, because we knew that's what she would have wanted for us to keep going, to not give up. I became wealthy, my dear, I won't lie. The restaurant was profitable. We could live well, provide an education for our children, have comfort. We bought a bigger house with a yard, a garage. I bought a new car, gave Clara and the children a good life. But I never changed. I never wanted to change. I remained simple. I remained humble. I arrived early every day at the restaurant, checked the inventory, tasted the beans, stood at the door greeting everyone who came in. I never thought I was better than anyone. I never looked down on anyone, because I knew where I came from. I knew what it was like to have nothing, and I would never forget. The restaurant came to employ many people. At its peak, we had over 20 employees. Cooks, kitchen helpers, waiters, cleaners, cashiers, and many of them were the children of old customers, people who had come for lunch when they were young, working construction, and now they sent their children to work for me. It was beautiful to see that we had built something that went beyond food. We had built a community, a family, a home. I treated my employees well, paid their salaries on time, gave them advances in the middle of the month if they needed it, helped them when they had problems. If an employee was going through a tough time, I helped. If they needed a doctor, I paid. If their child was sick, I gave them time off. Because I knew that a happy employee works well, and a well-treated employee is loyal, dedicated, is family, and the name Arthur eventually became synonymous with trust in the city, with a hard-working, honest man who succeeded without stepping on anyone. A man who built something from scratch, with work, with sweat, with faith. People respected me, and that, my dear, is priceless. Respect can't be bought. It's earned. All my children went to school, they all graduated. Some became teachers, another an engineer, another a nurse. And all of them, at some point in their lives, helped out at the restaurant. Weekends, holidays, there was always one of them there, washing dishes, waiting tables, working the register. And they learned the value of work. They learned that nothing falls from the sky, that everything is earned through effort. My father, Walter, lived to be 78. After we sold the farm and he paid off the house, he became calmer, more at peace. He worked at the same company until he retired, but over time, his body grew weaker. He started having pain in his back, in his legs. He got tired easily. He had heart problems too, high blood pressure, the things that come with age. We would visit him almost every Sunday, bring the grandkids, bring food. He liked it. He would smile, but I could see he was tired of living, of carrying that heavy weight from his childhood that he could never let go of. He died of a heart attack, my dear. Suddenly, he was sitting there watching television, and his heart just stopped. My mother called his name, and he didn't answer. He was already gone. It was quick, and I cried. I cried a lot. I loved him. My mother, Mrs. Helen, lived for another 6 years after he died. She stayed in the house alone, but we didn't leave her helpless, no. Every day one of us would go there, me, Clara. The grandkids bring food, keep her company, take care of her. Over time, she started to forget things. She'd forget names, forget where she put her keys, forget if she had already eaten. The doctor said it was Alzheimer's, that it would get worse. And it did. It got to a point where she didn't recognize me anymore. She would look at me and ask who I was. It hurt, my dear. It hurt so much. We never wanted to put her in a nursing home, never. We brought her to live with us. Clara took care of her until the end, with patience, with love. She gave her baths, fed her, changed her diapers. She treated her like her own mother, too. She died of pneumonia. She was hospitalized, stayed for a few days, and didn't make it. She passed away on a Wednesday night with us by her side, holding her hand, and I cried again. I cried for the mother who was always good, even when she couldn't go against her husband, and I cried because now I was an orphan. I had lost both my father and mother, and as much as we know it will happen one day, you're never prepared. And now, at 79, I still go to the restaurant, not to work, no, I don't need to anymore, 2 of my sons run the business now, but I go to visit. I go to see how things are. I sit in my corner of the counter, the place that was always mine. And I sit there, watching the hustle and bustle, talking with the customers, and I always order the same thing: rice, beans, and pot roast with potatoes. Simple food, food that reminds me of the beginning, food that tastes of struggle, of victory, of love. Clara, now 73, she is the love of my life. Margaret's kitchen is the true symbol of our overcoming. From that cursed inheritance money, stained with blood and tragedy, we built something good, something beautiful. And when I look at all of this, my dear, when I look at my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, at the restaurant full of people, full of life, I know it was all worth it. Every tear, every fear, every sleepless night was worth it, because we won, and we built our own destiny. My inheritance was not a curse, but a lesson paid for in blood. From the land that buried tragedy and took my firstborn son, I learned that the past has no power to define the future, neither does yours. Do not let old ghosts chain you. Face them, learn from them, and use the broken pieces to build a stronger foundation for yourself. Write your own final chapter. If this story of rising from the ashes resonates with you, subscribe to the channel to help spread the belief that we all have the strength to overcome.